truth comes out. And the other important idea is not just the intensity of his supporters, but how wide-ranging they are. You know, from right-wing Christians to anti-war progressives to small business owners to working moms. I don't think there's really a group that he hasn't touched other than the mainstream GOP establishment. Yeah.
Well, I think this is probably a pretty good time to go back and recap what's happened up to this event so far. And so, again, going back to Iowa, we had, you know, Bachmann was the star, giant raise in the polls, and then came down, and then we had Perry come in, and then Kane, and everybody's followed that path. Newt Gingrich came in, had that raise and fall. Same with Santorum, and so this has been the path of all the other candidates. But when you look at Ron Paul's numbers, it's continued to climb. I mean, early on he started with a couple percent, 6%, 2%, and again, out of 370 votes total now, 23%. And I think the people that are involved in the liberty movement, I think we understand that once you become part of liberty, you're not fickle about who you're going to stand for. You're going to stand, it's not necessarily Ron Paul, you're going to stand by the principles of liberty. So it could be, we were talking here before we got started, somebody like Gary Johnson who hasn't got the time of day, but and unfairly so. Yeah. I think he had better credentials than a lot of other people, but you know, this is a continued trend for Ron Paul. So we're going to go over to Gary here.
Yeah, right now we've got the boots on the ground in South Carolina. Dan Johnson and Aaron Jones will be Skyping in shortly. We're going to make a connection with them and see what the temperature of freedom looks like out there right now. The mainstream media is calling this race. I'm watching on an exterior monitor. They're saying it's Newt Gingrich. That's Fox News. And look right now, 0% reporting, and they are putting this thought into people's minds. It's appalling. And it looks like we've got Dan Johnson up on the feed. Let's bring in Dan. Dan, what's going on out there in South Carolina? Where are you guys at?
We're at Jillian's Billiard Hall in South Carolina. South Carolina. This is where there's the primary result watching party. As you can see, people are starting to trickle in here as the results come in. So the atmosphere is pretty positive. There's a lot of Paul supporters. A lot of people are getting food and drinks right now. But probably in the next few minutes, we're going to see a lot of people heading into this room here. There's a setup for Paul to speak at later going on. So it's a good. We have a lot of people here tonight.
This is good.
Well, that looks really great. It looks like people are starting to file in. You're at Jillian's, and what's the location there again?
We're in Columbia, South Carolina.
Columbia, South Carolina. And what are you seeing as far as the people, you know, the flavor? What are people talking about? What are you hearing being said in the hallways? I know because the media is now muttering that Newt Gingrich has taken South Carolina. How are the people reacting to that word, if they've heard it?
People aren't liking it. There's a lot of TVs up in here. I'm watching CNN right now here, and they're showing Gingrich as the presumptive winner, with Paul polling ahead of Romney right now, actually. So that's kind of being glossed over by the media. But the people that I've talked to here tonight, they're pretty confident that Paul is going to pull out a good showing in South Carolina, and that, you know, that the exit polling, everything, and from what they think, that he's going to do very well. So there's a lot of energy. People on the ground are excited about it, and they think that Paul's going to do a very good job.
All right, Dan, thanks for all you're doing out there. And if you got any interesting folks out there that'd like to talk to us, definitely hit us back up on Skype, and we'll be keeping in touch with you throughout the night.
All right, great. Thank you.
All right, that was Dan Johnson, boots on the ground,
right?
In South Carolina.
We got a few tweets here that we want to kind of cover, so we can talk with you. First of all, we have a few tweets here that are complaining about our ties and not wearing Ron Paul gear. We actually, to keep it a little bit light, I actually cut my hair for my mom. So if you're watching, hi Mom. Usually a little bit more shaggy, but we're going to look a little professional tonight. Maybe next time we'll get the Ron Paul gear on. A couple other things that are really important for us to talk about. When the media kept perpetuating the story that Ron Paul was unelectable. But if you take a look at it, right now, Rick Santorum and Newt Gingrich aren't on the ballot in a number of states for a total count of over 500 delegates that they can't get. And so that basically suggests that they aren't electable. And so when people are talking about electability, they discount Ron Paul. Well, the numbers don't jive that way. And on top of that, with Ron Paul pulling in 23% of the vote within these early caucus states, what does that say about Mitt Romney's electability without his base? I mean, what are your thoughts on that, guys? Any thoughts?
Well, it's also interesting to note that Mitt Romney topped out at 25% in Iowa 4 years ago, and he got the same percentage here, and he lost to the guy who lost to Obama pretty badly. So that doesn't say a whole lot about his electability, not to mention the fact that whoever the GOP candidate is will most likely need at least some of Ron Paul's supporters in order to win. So I would think that would make Mitt Romney perhaps unelectable, as I believe Andrew Napolitano had said.
If you consider it, if you want to look at it from the perspective of who's good to go against Obama, Mitt Romney in Iowa, he got less votes than he had gotten 4 years prior. So that's not a good sign that, here's another candidate that the GOP base is really feeling confident about. He's actually not getting bigger. He's, at least in Iowa, had, although he did a little better in New Hampshire. So I think that these are some other things to consider as they try to indicate that there's certain candidates that are surging and what have you. I think that it's going to be a long road even for the candidate that they think is going to.
Well, and I think it comes down to whether Ron Paul or not gets the nomination. We quite certainly can say that his base will let him go the distance, and he's going to be collecting delegates, which suggests a brokered convention. So if he collects, in order for the nominee to get to fully go the distance, they have to have that 1,144. And if they don't have that, then they're going to have to deal with Ron Paul at the convention, which could really shape the platform. That happened with Jesse Jackson in the early 80s and Barry Goldwater as well. And so I think, in my opinion, it seems like a lot of the conservative pundits are a bit concerned about that, to have Ron Paul be able to interject a brokered convention and get some of his platform in if he doesn't take it. And again, my personal feelings are it is too early. Everyone else has had that surge and fall. Mitt Romney might be along that case. We don't know. We haven't seen it.
The longer the race lasts, the better it is going to be for Ron Paul. The more the mainstream media is going to have more trouble ignoring him. And the only problem, though, is that with the brokered convention, I understand the media can add other candidates, or not the media, but I guess like a Freudian slip. There are other candidates that could be added later in order to siphon off votes from Ron Paul. I don't know if I've understood it correctly. I think there's a lot of misconception about this brokered convention.
I just want to jump in real quick here because we're getting some first reporting, early reporting now, that well, of course we know the mainstream media. This is the thing. They've already called it for Gingrich, but we're going to play a different game here. First of all, I want to say there are 1,131 people who are watching the stream right now, and here we are watching the South Carolina primary returns. Looks like the first county is Hampton County for Mitt Romney is the first county to show anything, and 35.9% Romney, 35.9% Gingrich. Rick Perry is showing 5.1%. I don't know how that could be. I guess they left him on the ballot. Huh? Rick Santorum is still at 15.4%. 5.1% of the people are still voting for Rick Perry. They just didn't get the memo, apparently. So right now, 1,148 people on the stream. First county is reporting at Mitt Romney is in the lead. I'll start this. What's going on in your neck of the woods, guys?
Well, we've got some somewhat encouraging news here. We're getting reports, one, that Ron Paul is polling second in certain exit polls, which is very interesting. And it's interesting that I'm seeing we have Fox News off on a screen over here, and of course they have the big headline, Gingrich wins South Carolina primary, less than 1% reporting. And it's like, well, that's all you need to know. Move on, change the channel. This is the story. That way, if Ron Paul is coming in second, the people won't really need to be paying attention at that point. It'll get played down. All you need to know is Gingrich won, as we predicted. That's the end of it. We also have encouraging news that is consistent with this, that turnout has been higher in crossover districts where you have the independents who are voting and who are likely to go for Ron Paul. So it looks good for Ron Paul. The mainstream media won't make it sound good no matter what happens, but signs are encouraging for that. We also have a question from a tweet. Will Ron Paul run third party? Well, you know, again, that's kind of, when the mainstream media asks that, it's like a condescending question, right? Because it's like, because of course you're not going to win the Republican nomination, which they wouldn't ask anybody else. But no, I don't think if Ron Paul does not get the Republican nomination, I don't think he'll run third party. Some of you may have seen Pat Buchanan, I think in his most recent column, was talking about this. Pat Buchanan predicts that Ron Paul wants influence at the Republican convention, as we were discussing, and he won't get that if he actually does run third party. But it's good that he has that threat, of course, because without that threat, they don't have that much reason to listen to him. But with the leverage of him running third party, stealing some of your votes, and ruining everything for you, there's some leverage there to get more things done. But at the end of the day, I don't think he'll do it. Rand Paul is a rising star in the Republican Party. I don't think Ron Paul will tamper with that. So I don't think you'll see a third-party run there. Maybe the others have other perspectives on this.
No, I think I would agree, and the liberty-centric mind thinks it's not about an individual, it's about the ideas of the movement, and he happens to be the pallbearer of that right now, no pun intended.
Yeah.
But I think he's absolutely right. When we take a look at Ron Paul's career over the last 3 decades, he was kind of that lone guy in a field that stood by these principles of liberty and constitutional governance. But today, we have a whole litany of people that run and are in office now. We have Justin Amash out of Michigan. We've got Mike Lee out of Utah. Rand Paul, Senator out of Kentucky. Very powerful. And I even have to say, going to South Carolina, if you take a look at Jim DeMint, over the last couple years, he's really shaped to be, I hate to say the word rogue, but he's gone against his party to really stand for some pretty strong constitutional principles, supporting Rand Paul in his Senate run in Kentucky, where the establishment wouldn't do that. And his book's come out recently, and it is pretty eye-opening relative to some of his stances on this. So I think, you know, you're absolutely right. I don't think he's going to run, but I think the future of liberty is very strong. I mean, what do you think?
I think it's still kind of early to say whether he would or wouldn't. You know, I kind of have a different philosophy. It could be a little biased that I'd like him to, but I think it depends on how much he grows. If he grows significantly over the course of this, whereby you know, he is a big threat, but say the GOP won't accept him as the GOP candidate, you know, there's a possibility that maybe, you know, but at the same token, there's also individuals like Gary Johnson, who initially was on the GOP platform, had now moved over to the Libertarian Party, and I agree. I think that Ron Paul, at least, it's the movement of liberty and the information and the message that he's trying to get out. When you have an individual like Gary Johnson, that kind of has that same sort of platform, I think that I don't really see him so much going third party, because it really kind of siphons those two, and it really, I don't think would...
Almost to shake up the beehive here, though, it's kind of interesting when they talk about Ron Paul's unelectability. But, you know, the polls right now are suggesting Mitt Romney is a front runner without Ron Paul's following is unelectable. Yeah. So does that suggest that maybe Mitt Romney should run third party? I mean,
well, yeah.
As what Jacob said before, why don't they ask anybody else, you know, if they're running third party? What's really exciting is the fact that many mainstream Republicans are acknowledging Ron Paul's importance in this race, whereas they never really would have talked about that before. It's his ideas that are winning, and it's the fact that all these other candidates are going to be forgotten about. Their ideas are going to be forgotten about very quickly after the race is over. Even Charles Krauthammer, although he certainly doesn't agree with Ron Paul by any stretch of the imagination, even Charles Krauthammer has acknowledged that Ron Paul's day has arrived, and that Ron Paul has brought libertarianism and the ideas it espouses to the national stage. Even Sarah Palin, who, although she clearly has not endorsed Ron Paul, did temper her statement about his stance on Israel, saying that Ron Paul does care about Israel, just in a different way. So this is an acknowledgement that people really do believe that Ron Paul's support matters, and that they've acknowledged that they really do need his support in order to further their agendas. This is the ultimate victory, and even furthermore, that Rand Paul in 2016 is, I think, going to pose a formidable threat, because those ideas are going to continue to simmer in people's minds for the next several years.
Well, and we have something that just came in here that it's fascinating, and they have a historic, the news that we got here is a historic 40% majority independent turnout from the Gallup poll. And I think those in the liberty movement understand where that's coming from. That's for Ron Paul. He has this tremendous independent movement that back in the 2008 elections, it was really for Barack Obama at that time. And the youth in that independent vote, I think, really are starting to see that voting for the mainstream candidates really has resulted in about the same policies. You know, you started touching on some policy issues, but frankly, the continuation of this last presidency was almost a mirror of what the prior administration had done, not that much different. And so the independents and the kids that always get derided, not always, but in the media that make them seem like they're not so smart, you know, the youth generation is a lot smarter than they get credit for. Yeah. They understand the issues that are facing our country with the debt loads and the loss of individual liberties and civil liberties and so forth and perpetual warfare. They're not dumb. As a matter of fact, I look at the youth at some of the events that I've been to and I'm endlessly impressed. And we're starting to see this, you know, here's a 76-year-old kind, humble gentleman from 14th Congressional District of Texas, and the kids love him. He goes to universities. I've been there and seen it, and he packs auditoriums, and it's clear why. I think the future of liberty and constitutional government, I think it's in good hands. I really do.
All right, guys. Well, I'm going to jump in here real quick because we're getting some more counties returning. Also, Thomas Woods, the best-selling author of Meltdown and Nullification, will be joining us on Skype in about 5 minutes, everybody. So stay tuned. We'll have Tom Woods for you with his commentary on the returns and, of course, the media calling it for Gingrich. We can see on the studio monitors that Gingrich is getting ready to make his own statement. Well, let's take a look at ourselves here. We can see that according to the Associated Press, Romney is in the lead with 36.4% over Gingrich at 33.8%. Santorum's at 13.6%, and Paul is at 9.7%. Of course, we're only seeing 0.1% reporting, and even though the media is calling it for Gingrich, we're still seeing Romney in the lead. Right now we have looks like Oconee County and Lawrence County, Greenwood County, Newberry County, Berkeley County, Barnwell, Allendale, and Hampton are all reporting. So the numbers are coming in. The mainstream media is not exactly right to call it for Gingrich, as we can see Romney is currently in the lead with 38.1%, pulling ahead of Gingrich. We'll be joined by Thomas Woods shortly. Guys, when Tom calls in, you know, he'll be on the monitor over there, and we'll be able to get his thoughts.
Great. We have another comment here, and I think it's a pretty good one. This is a tweet that came in. How can South Carolina support a guy who's not on the ballot in 50 states? I'm from Virginia. We love your state, home of Thomas Jefferson. And he couldn't even get on in his own state. It's a good question. And the comment I made earlier is that both Santorum and Gingrich, they're not on the ballot in enough states where they can't get 500 delegates. And that, to me, shows that they're unelectable at the convention. And so, in my opinion, as this goes on and as they stay in the race, I think it actually favors Paul's campaign, because ultimately it's going to come down to a decision where Paul's got, like I said, up till now, 23% of the vote of 370,000 cast. And it's going to come down to, is it the mainstream, true, you know, the mainstream guy, Mitt Romney, or is it going to be the true conservative Ron Paul? And that's that. And Romney's record, which you probably won't hear on the media, it clearly isn't one of conservatism. It's not historically. So what do you guys think?
Thanks to the internet now, we can openly see everybody's positions, and I certainly don't know all of Romney's positions, but like many of the other candidates, he's a chameleon, and many people believe he'll simply say whatever he can to get elected. Newt Gingrich has clearly flip-flopped so many times, it's very hard to trust what he says he's going to do is what he actually is going to do, and Ron Paul's voting record is so incredibly consistent that nobody can attack him. They've thrown everything they can at him, and really nothing has hurt him very much.
Well, I think this is one of the key components of the mainstream media, and why, because there are a number of states that the other candidates are not on. The only two candidates that are on every single ballot in every state is Ron Paul and Mitt Romney. So I think in some regards, if the mainstream media were to report that to individuals, then it would come down to a Ron Paul Mitt Romney race, and they absolutely don't want that. So to you know, what's been fortunate is through the internet and stuff, people have been able to find that on the other hand, there is oftentimes, people don't do the research. We've seen this time and time again. We see oftentimes there's candidates that are voted into office that we know their voting record, it's horrible, but people just don't look into it. So that is a concern that at least I have of probably the mass majority of people not knowing that many of these candidates aren't on ballots across the United States. And a lot of that's the trouble of the mainstream media to not really bring that to head, I think, oftentimes, or really shed light on what that actually means in the long run in terms of this campaign.
Yeah.
I see people retweeting, a number of people retweeted what I think is a pretty interesting question. They're asking, what can Ron Paul really expect from voters in South Carolina who gave a standing ovation for infidelity and booed the golden rule? Now, of course, they're referring to this debate where Ron Paul, of course, states his position or his sort of thought experiment. How would we feel if these countries were coming in, were doing what we're doing to them, to us, which is a perfectly reasonable question. And the suggestion is, we should do unto others as we would have them do unto us. And of course, this was roundly booed at the debate in South Carolina. I think that's an excellent question. It's the biggest hurdle for Ron Paul in the Republican Party, right? The militarism, and nationalism that so prevails among a certain segment of the Republican primary voters. And it's a reason why I think that the Republican nomination is going to be tough for him, because there's a lot of people whose hearts and minds need to be changed on this issue within the Republican Party. How you can do that, I'm not sure, because it runs pretty deep. Maybe some of the other panelists have thoughts on what we can do to change that, to let Ron Paul advance in an environment like that without moderating his stances.
Well, and excellent point, and I have a couple thoughts. And I'm going to have the mea culpa moment right now, because I was the guy. You guys can boo and hiss. I did vote for George Bush twice. That was before my Grand Liberty Awakening, so I'm that bad guy. But I think I understand where a lot of that thought process comes from. Back after September 11 happened, there was a lot of national pride, and a lot of the pride came from being wounded, and the story was that we have to go defend ourselves and America's great, and we buy into that. But I think, clearly 10 years down the road, where what was told to get us into these wars weren't necessarily true, at least the end result. And so I think it's a generational issue. For me, after a certain amount of time, I had to look at the data and said, how long can I justify this thought pattern? And that started happening to me in 2005 and 6. It just, what I thought was right clearly wasn't. The older folks that have been around, post-World War II and stuff, they have a little bit different perspective on the greatness of America, and I think it is kind of generational. The younger kids do see, through the media exchange, they do see a different path now.
I think for me, I've always had it from the perspective of, I understand historically the United States has always been very proud to be very nationally defense strong, and I'm a great proponent of that. I think it's just two very deviations of how you get that objective goal. Some look at it as, we have to police the world, we have to be, and with those individuals, we have to change the minds of them. Now, I come from a perspective where I look at, the soldiers, and I think our role for this country is to protect our own, and that also includes our soldiers, and not to put them into harm's way, not putting in circumstances, wars, where it's not necessary. So I've come from a different mentality where I think it's our goal as Americans to not only, and part of protecting ourselves is also protecting the interest of our soldiers too, rather than doing that. So if we can get the other side to kind of understand that same concept, I think that maybe we could start moving forward. And I agree, I think a lot of it's going to be with the younger generations.
Well, in the last couple debates, Ron Paul, I think, clearly delineated that being a nation of strong defense is different than military spending. As a matter of fact, those two don't shake hands at all. When you spend yourself past the point of no return, that has been the fall of a lot of empires. And so I think we have some new results, Gary, coming in?
Yep, some new results. New counties are reporting, and Thomas Woods, just for everyone out there in TV land to know, Tom is starting up his computer now, so he'll be joining us shortly. As you can see by the monitor here, it looks like Romney is still pulling ahead considerably from Gingrich at 37.8%. Looks like 1,991 votes, I believe that's what the number is, and significant number of more counties, but there's still some high density counties that have yet to report, and as soon as those do come in, it could shift the entire match here. It looks like Paul is still behind Santorum by about 4 points, And again, those other counties could give us hope and could put Paul up into and above and beyond the Santorum number 3 spot. So Gingrich is still holding at number 2. Perry, well, people are still voting for him. I don't quite know why. And even Herman Cain and Michelle Bachmann got a few votes. So God bless all those good voters out there who are paying attention to what's going on. But we're here to give you the news, to give you the results, because, well, someone's got to give you the real deal. Guys, let's. I hope that Tom should be getting his computer up pretty soon. So.
And when he comes on, we love Tom Woods, and we're looking forward to speaking with him. We have a question here that I think is exceptional. This comes from Jabpeed. How do you think Ron Paul should approach the large Latino community in Florida? Well, obviously Florida is the next primary state, but I think that question transcends Florida. And I have two direct thoughts on why I think Ron Paul is the best candidate for the Latino community. First off, the Liberty platform itself is about free trade with nations, and then you take a look at the large Cuban population in Florida and how much they've suffered from trade embargoes and so forth, and this post World War II Cold War stance with that country, I think has really hurt the people. Obviously, the government there is oppressive and a social government that's not particularly good for the people. But I don't think not allowing to trade and open that business is ultimately good for them. And secondly, I think we could also say that the drug war in this country had a large negative impact on that community. And Jacob Hubert, he's I think an expert in this topic. It's perfect to have him on board here to give his thoughts on that.
Well, I don't know how much of an expert I am on this, but I do know that the drug war has turned Mexico into a war zone, of course, the northern part of Mexico at least, where people are being killed constantly, kidnappings going on, murders going on. I would think that this would be of importance to Latino voters. I saw some article on foxnews.com or something where it's like, what should Latinos think about Ron Paul? And they go through some issues that are very uninteresting. They don't say anything about the drug war, but of course the drug war is what's tearing Mexico apart. And Mexicans in Mexico know this. You have former presidents of Mexico and other Latin American countries calling for an end to the drug war because they know it's causing so much death and destruction where they are. So I would think this would be important to Latino voters. I think it's important to educate them and everybody else on this. So I think that's a very important thing that Ron Paul has done to some extent and could do more.
Yeah, and you look at the disproportionate numbers of minorities that are actually thrown in prison for nonviolent drug offenses. I mean, 40% of our prisons are filled with nonviolent drug offenses. Folks, we're switching up. Looks like Tom Woods is on board here, sitting down. Tom, can you hear us?
Hi, Tom.
Can we hear you, Tom? We got a feed in here. We have a little technical difficulty, Tom. Hold up your hand if you can hear us.
I can hear you.
We can hear
Okay,
you now.
very
Tom,
good.
Welcome aboard. It's great to have you.
Thanks. And I'm at a state senate fundraiser in Utah, so I've found a quiet back room to talk to you guys. I'm glad to be able to do it. And I'm sorry the lighting is not good. It's not a professional studio here. It's just the back room of the university.
Have you, Tom? And so, what state senator fundraiser are you there for?
Casey Anderson in we're in southern Utah at Southern Utah University.
Great.
He's one of the good guys for sure.
Great. So
He's in there already. He is a state senator already. We just want to keep him.
A good Liberty senator.
Absolutely. I mean, he's totally sound and reliable on everything. So I'm glad to be here.
Tom, what's your sense in Utah with respect to all the GOP candidates and how things are playing out over there?
I missed the first part of the question. Are you asking about Utah specifically?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Well, I've barely been able to mingle with people yet, so I haven't got a sense of things. But Utah's, the sense I have gotten just from my own reading is that there is a very substantial slice of the Mormon community that leans in the Ron Paul direction. And my friend Connor Boyack just wrote a book on basically on making the case for liberty to Mormons. It's been very successful and has Ron Paul's endorsement. But also, there was an initiative here about, a year ago maybe, and I hope you won't think I'm such an ego case that I evaluate a state based on whether or not they read my books. However, there was a campaign to get a copy of my book Nullification into the hands of every single state legislator. And now there's at least one gubernatorial candidate who's very interested in the concept. So, in other words, there's more receptiveness here than there might be, say, in my home state, which I'm ashamed to tell you is Massachusetts. It's got many beautiful qualities, but the politics is not one of them.
Yeah, I think Mitt came from there, so thank you, Tom, very much. Mike,
it's not my fault. Come on.
Oh, you're great. So what's your thoughts on Senator Lee's impact on Utah and how that's playing out in the state and his influence of, pretty liberty-centric guy?
I think so. I don't know enough about his record to really say, but it speaks well of anybody who would go to a Campaign for Liberty event and would associate with our people and not treat us as radioactive. I mean, that is a step forward, I will grant you.
Especially for a senator position as well.
Right.
So what are your thoughts in South Carolina here with the caucuses? This is coming down.
Well, my thinking is now, if these exit polls are accurate, of course we would have preferred to do better, but I think we should bear in mind what the campaign strategy was. They were not planning to campaign heavily in South Carolina because in 2008, Dr. Paul got 3.7% of the vote, and if you've got a voting bloc down there that it's very difficult to crack into for some reason. Even though somebody like Mitt Romney, who is doing much better than Dr. Paul, it just holds South Carolina in complete contempt. So why they would vote for somebody who hates them is completely beyond me. But bear in mind that Santorum had 6 official offices open in South Carolina for a long time. Dr. Paul only, I don't know, I think within the past week they opened like 1 office in Columbia. Everything else was totally grassroots. No other campaign had that type of work. And for him to basically, to quadruple his performance last time is pretty good in a state where he didn't expect to do particularly well. And then we bear in mind we've got a lot of caucus states coming up. Bear in mind that Gingrich and Santorum aren't even on the ballot in states that, when you add them up, they amount to well over 500 delegates. So I wouldn't be too demoralized over this result. I mean, remember, Dr. Paul is not just like another Republican who's talking about lowering your taxes and going to shoot the towel heads. I mean, he is putting forth an extremely radical position that's very hard for conventional thinkers to get their heads around. It's not what the typical Republican voter is accustomed to hearing. And a lot of these people, let's be frank, are going to cast their vote for the person who sounds the most like a conventional Republican and who repeats the talking points. He doesn't do that. And for him to nevertheless quadruple his support at a time when the media totally excludes him from the discussion, he gets 1 mention in the post-debate discussion on CNN when the others combined got about 250. The fact that he can rise above that and still perform, basically the same level as Santorum is still pretty impressive.
Have some data here, and I'm curious to get your thoughts on this, that the Fox exit poll shows that, at least in South Carolina, 7 of 10 voters are Tea Party supporters. And so what do you think the proper way to approach that group of people? Because, as we know, Ron Paul was the godfather of that whole movement back in 2007, but it seems like the Tea Party never had a cohesive group. And a lot of it's kind of fractured, some of it being more along the lines of the neoconservative line, some along the Ron Paul line. But if 7 of 10 voters are aligning themselves with the Tea Party group and they're not voting for Ron Paul out of South Carolina, what do you think would be a good strategy to approach those people? And what do you think the hurdle is?
That's hard to say. I mean, a lot of them, I've spoken to a lot of groups, a lot of events that have been sponsored by Tea Party groups, and it's a much older demographic on average. I mean, it's not a 22-year-old who typically is heading up a Tea Party or is attending their events. It tends to be retirees. Not all, obviously, can't generalize entirely, but overwhelmingly so. That's been my experience, and that's not Dr. Paul's demographic. By the time you get to that age, you're fairly set in your ways on a lot of issues, so it's very hard to reach them on the foreign policy question, even when you are on the brink of bankruptcy. These are folks who get their news from conventional sources by and large, and so they think that it's sort of cheeky to get your news from Fox News. That's how out on a limb they are. They're going to go to Fox News for their information. So it is tricky to appeal to them. I would just remind them that, what was the thing started over? It was started over concerns about debt deficits, spending, and bailouts. Well, who's the only credible candidate on any of those issues? Any of those issues. I mean, in terms of bailouts, well, Romney and Gingrich both supported TARP, and you can just go on down the line. And in terms of spending, neither one of them has any credibility whatsoever. That neither one has proposed any actual cuts. I mean, the most you might get is some lip service to slowing the rate of growth of spending. None of we all. I mean, how many times do we have to go through this, right? I mean, how many John McCains and Bob Doles and George W. Bushes need to be nominated before you wake up and realize that this isn't just a matter of the crazy quasi-communist Democrats wrecking your country. It's the whole political class wrecking your country. And until they wake up and realize that, then they're going to get what they deserve. They're going to keep voting for these phonies, and they're going to get what they deserve.
Tom.
Sorry, I realize that's not so diplomatic. I'm supposed to think of diplomatic ways.
Hey, you're with RevPAC right now, so that's quite all right.
Yeah,
you can be
of
undiplomatic
course.
as you want, and we'll listen to you. We'll give you your fair shake.
Thank you.
Yeah. I was curious to know, do you think it's completely hopeless to attempt to reach the traditional Tea Party conservatives on the issue of foreign policy and focus more on the other issues that we agree, or do we keep trying to explain our foreign policy positions in a way that they might be receptive to?
Well, I think by and large they've tried the strategy of avoiding the issue and talking about other things. I think that has been the strategy. I think the campaign has made some pretty good TV ads. I've liked a lot of them. And they basically focused on non-foreign policy issues. And I think maybe they wanted to see how far would that take them. Well, it takes them pretty far. At this point, pretty far isn't going to cut it. So what's the worst that could happen at this point? I mean, the worst that could happen is that he keeps coming in second and third, and he doesn't win. But the best that could happen is that somehow he turns things around by persuading some of these Romney people, persuading some of these people who, they just don't get what he's saying. I would just try that. You can make a good budget-based, realist-based argument about foreign policy, and you can also say that even for those who are concerned about Islamic domination of the world, that the foreign policy that we've had has not exactly halted this process. To the contrary, it keeps deposing secular dictators who are frankly not all that interested in Islam, and replacing them with regimes that are much more heavily interested in Islam. In what way is that actually acting in the interests of these Tea Party anti-Islam people? So even on their own terms, the foreign policy is a disaster. So I don't see that this is a loser of an issue. This is a total winner, depending on how you frame it.
Yeah, it's a really good point. We actually have a pretty interesting question here that I think you'd be excellent to answer. I know I have my thoughts.
I'm sorry to say, it probably has to be my last one, because I do need to run to get back to this event.
No problem. Ron Paul's the only candidate proposing real cuts. How can he do that in 1 year? So he's offered his $1 trillion in cuts. And obviously the executive branch has relatively limited powers, so how would you see him doing that mechanically?
Okay, well, I have a couple answers to this. The first is, if Ron Paul was elected president, that would reflect a massive sea change in the character of the American electorate. I mean, it would be perhaps the most dramatic event in 100 years of American history for him to be elected. So with that type of just massive, especially given he's got every interest group arrayed against him, the banks, the media, the political class, the academic class, the military-industrial complex, if he comes out ahead after all that, that indicates he is one strong, you-know-what. I mean, he is a strong character now. And one thing that politicians are responsive to is fear of losing their jobs. And if they see that there's that kind of momentum behind this guy, that nothing could stop him, not any of these obstacles could stop him, then you know what? They might rally to this guy. He just might get this thing through. But even if he doesn't, the very fact that he puts it on the table gets us talking in a much more healthy way than any of these other candidates will, because the best they'll do is say, well, we'll try and trim the projected budget for next year, which is 20% higher than this year's budget, by 10%. You know, I mean, whereas this type of budget actually prompts us to rethink the very nature and purpose of government. I mean, it actually evokes and provokes a national philosophical discussion. Well, we never have that in politics. So for that very purpose alone, just the educational value alone is good. But the fact is, if he was elected, he would impart just a whole new character to American politics, there would be a streak of fear in these people, the likes of which we've never seen. And fear makes people suddenly turn around. I mean, when they see something's popular, they jump on the bandwagon. I mean, look at Newt wanting to audit the Fed and find out about the status of its gold, and now he's against restrictions on the internet, and even toward the end of the last campaign, Huckabee, or during the past 4 years, Huckabee is all upset about the TSA. These aren't natural issues these people would have been talking about otherwise. They're chameleons who just want to hang on to power, and they'll do what they have to do. So maybe they could be cajoled into doing the right thing, very much against their better judgment, but just to preserve themselves politically. But as I say, I really have to run at this point. I'm sorry to report, but good luck to you guys, and keep smashing the mainstream media for us.
Thanks, Tom. It's great having you.
Take care.
You too.
All right, that was Tom Woods from his fundraising event out there in Utah. I just got off the phone with Peter Schiff, and Peter said he's watching the stream along with hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of other Ron Paul supporters. Looks like right now, as you can see on the monitor behind me, the only thing that is separating Paul from Santorum for the race for third place is about 800 or so votes. So we have many more counties that have yet to report. As you can see, Gingrich is still, wait, did I just say Gingrich is still? Yeah, Gingrich is now in the lead over Romney. He looks like he just jumped over him.
No.
So we'll see what happens as the rest of the counties report in. Peter Schiff will be joining us in about an hour and 10 minutes, so you want to be sure to get Peter's take on this whole South Carolina election. And let's see, right now we only have 2.9% reporting, so we do have a long night ahead of us. And I want to make special note of, if you scroll down to the very bottom of this web page, you will see a donate form. We need your support. This broadcast, our efforts, the commercials that we've aired all over the country on CNN, during debates, the compassion of Dr. Paul, adherence to the oath, plastic men, wonderfully produced commercials that have high impact and high production value are only made possible by your support. So, take a second, scroll down to the bottom, fill out that form, and make a donation to us today so that we can continue to have those high impacting commercials and bring you broadcasts like this that the mainstream media will refuse to acknowledge. And well, Ron Paul is the man. So what else is going on?
We have an excellent question here, but I'd like to continue just for one point, the last discussion we had with Tom Woods, and that was, how could President Paul cut $1 trillion out of the budget? One of the things that I don't really hear the group's talking about, one of the delegated authorities to the president is to sign bills. And so the budget, which is set by Congress, can go to his table, at which point he could veto it and send it back to Congress, at which point it needs a supermajority override. And that point puts a lot of pressure on the congressman, especially if he does get elected into office as a president. That would suggest a sea change in the way people think, and could definitely pressure Congress to have to go back and really take a look at their budgets to trim it up relative, or otherwise they'd have to put their necks out to override that against the will of the people. And so do you guys have thoughts on that? It's something I haven't heard talked about too much. But
I agree completely. I mean, just using those vetoes, and Ron Paul would do it. No one else would, but Ron Paul, he would just do it. And
or Gary Johnson, which one?
Yeah, well, I guess, Gary Johnson's proved himself in that respect, too. I got to give him credit.
Yeah, well, really, if you think about it, it's, the other good component about having, our mainstream media candidates is that they are, unlike Ron Paul, who's entirely principled, he's going to do what he feels is in the best interest of the country. We have another gap of politicians that are absolutely moved by, the pressure of the community. And so this is a part where then the American people have a say. So although, I think the breakdown has been over the years that we've sent elected officials, congressmen, senators, but we've never really followed what they've done. They pass these bills, they vote one way, and nobody follows it, and that's why they get away with it. But I think if, along with Ron Paul's movement, this whole concept that if the people get more involved, they follow the candidates, they get involved, they pledge, they call, when certain instances come up, that's when you can, because a lot of Ron Paul's principles, you have a vast majority of people that really like it. If you talk to most people, they say, I love Ron Paul, I love all of his, but my concern is his foreign policy. So there is a big component of a lot of support out there for a lot of his basic, his platform. It's just actually getting the American people to, get behind their candidates that they elected, make sure that they're doing, they're voting in the best interest of the, their constituents.
I think what's so exciting about this movement is that while Ron Paul isn't going to last forever, his ideas are not going to go away. What happens in 2016 and 2020? Because of the power of the internet, we now can find out the truth much more so than we ever could before, because the truth is no longer centrally controlled. And the fact that so many of his supporters are young people, what's that going to say for what's going to happen 10, 20 years from now? How big of a force will they be? And then what will the children of all these young people believe? We hope that their parents will influence them somewhat, but we know while that doesn't always happen, people grow up without knowing what it's like not to have the internet. And the more information is out there, I think the more favorable it is to ideas espoused by those like Ron Paul.
Yeah, and with the young people, the evidence isn't just anecdotal. We see young people at rallies. I mean, the numbers coming out of the New Hampshire exit polls showed that he won overwhelmingly among all voters in their 20s, and a substantial majority, or plurality rather, among all voters in their 30s. This says extremely encouraging things for the future.
And I agree. And for those, I'm going to plug a book that I just read recently, but The Declaration of Independence by Nick Gillespie and Matt Welch, I think really covered the demographics of that movement really, really well. And what you see is we are on the cusp of a sea change of ideas in this country, and that the independents really are larger than the Democratic Party, and they're approaching the Republican Party in size. And as information has come not just necessarily from the mainstream media, but as this group comes from a lot different sources and is out there tweeting and Facebooking, that's the sea change in politics that's coming. And I really feel that right now we're in a transition period where the mainstream is fighting it, and the grand old party's fighting it, and the Democratic Party's fighting it. But ultimately, the independents and the libertarian leaning, the classical liberals, the ANCAPs, anarcho-capitalists, Rothbardians, the whole group are growing daily, and that really is the future. And I think it bodes well for it. And I think that's a good segue to an excellent tweet we had here, which I think Erin will be, she obviously would give us better perspective on this, but this is from Juicy Grabs. How do we get more women to support Ron Paul? Paul has a lower percentage of women in the movement, so I think this is a perfect question for you.
Well, I think with everybody has different components of what moves them. It could be abortion, could be one of the more significant reasons why somebody votes in a certain way. But I think on the whole for women, I would say it's the whole concept, Ron Paul's whole concept of liberty. And it's really trying to pull us back to, what the founding fathers wanted is, the independence and the individualized. Now, over the history, women have not had it maybe the same rights as men have. And we've come a long way, but I think, Ron Paul is really the candidate that really encourages more of that. Not seeing people in groups, not seeing people by genders or what have you. So I think that's a big component of when us as a community and even women start to embrace this liberty to be seen as individuals and have our equal space. Additionally, I also think Ron Paul's economics is huge for women, because you figure Ron Paul's economic or his monetary policy is much stronger for small business owners. And in my understanding is there's been an influx, great influx of women starting small businesses, being very creative, and I think when they start to realize that Ron Paul, how much he values that component and how he strengthens that, I really think that it can be, but it all goes back, I think, ultimately to the liberty concept.
And foreign policy might be worth a mention too here. I mean, I don't know what's important to all women today, but historically, women have been favored the anti-war position. The first female in Congress voted against entry into World War I and World War II. And so there's a long tradition of that. I think maybe women who supported Obama as an anti-war candidate might see what he's actually doing there, and there's a real opportunity to appeal to those people by showing that the killing of women and children in other countries by the thousands continues to go on under Obama, and under Ron Paul that wouldn't go on. So I think that needs to be made more explicit to reach out to those people.
Yeah. And here's another point I want to add. I think it's the whole concept that Ron Paul often talks about. It's what's the role of government in your life? I think over the generations we've been espoused this idea that the government needs to protect women or protect this, and really is oftentimes done the opposite. The aggregate effects of, sometimes if we can collectively get to, the position that Ron Paul has of liberty and the importance of individual liberty, I think it's a better route for women in the long run, and once people start to understand that, I think that'll grow significantly.
Well, and personally, just being on the ground at different events, whether it was the Iowa caucus or New Hampshire or other places, or even Nevada that I've been and seen recently, definitely amongst the youth, the college kids right now and those just coming out of high school, demographically roughly from 18 to 30, I see a lot more of that balance. I do see a lot more of the women with the men, and as cheesy as it sounds, I mean, how many girls say, "Oh, I got a crush on Ron Paul"? They just this wonderful, humble, gentle 76-year-old man. It's just a different world, and the beautiful thing that I think we could all agree on, it's about the principles and the ideas, which is a very different. Again, it's a sea change for what normally happens. Of course, people tend to be attracted to the really charismatic and the good speaking, but this time around, it's about the ideas, and that has a weight that will carry on well past Ron Paul's time into the other future leaders that was coming. There was another tweet here that was asking who they thought would carry that banner past Ron Paul, and again, we've got Justin Amash out of Michigan, and for those that aren't familiar with him, I highly encourage for you to look at him and his record. It's outstanding. We've got Rand Paul, who's shown his true colors to be outstanding, and as a senator, a good run in 2016 is shaping up.
There's another individual that I oftentimes see. I've never really follow the whole concept of a party loyalty necessarily. I really try to look at each candidate, see what their voting record is, and move according to that. I've also been impressed with Kucinich. He's from Michigan. He's a Democrat. He's a Democrat, but I think that he really does have some sound liberty base. Really trying to understand. He holds a lot of the same views as Ron Paul does, maybe in foreign policy and or the Federal Reserve, which is another huge component of the Ron Paul movement. You don't necessarily have to be liberty leaning, but there's vast majority of areas where you can find elected officials that are on board with some of our core Ron Paul's core stance and change in this country.
We've never talked about the Federal Reserve. I don't ever remember in my lifetime the Federal Reserve being an issue in the election because so few people understand it. I'm a financial advisor. I'm supposed to understand how the debasement of our money supply works, and for the most part I do, but even I have a lot of questions about how the Federal Reserve actually works. And you hear other candidates such as Rick Perry in one of the debates said, I became much more interested in the Federal Reserve because of Ron Paul. You hear Michelle Bachmann talking about reading Ludwig von Mises on the beach. And you hear Newt Gingrich talked about how Ben Bernanke ought to be fired. Now, while I do think Gingrich misses the larger point, they never would have mentioned the Federal Reserve if it were not for Ron Paul constantly talking about that issue, and it's their way of acknowledging that that's an important topic to talk about begrudgingly, because now I see, Ron Paul, your supporters care about this issue. You have enough supporters to make it matter to what I say, so now I'm going to talk about it, not because I care, but because I know I need to get votes. That's the cynical way of looking at it, but I think there are a lot of people that share that view. And one other comment as to how we're going to continue this, maybe it's some of the people watching and listening to us today. Very much. Those are the ones I'm excited about. Everyone listening, watching this broadcast here.
Absolutely. I mean, I think we all have our personal stories of how we got here. And earlier I was that guy that said I was independent, but voted for clearly people that weren't conservative or upheld the liberty ideal. And then I had my awakening, and from that point forward. And you're absolutely right. You don't ever know who the leaders are, but they're out there.
Yeah, I mean, how many people who Ron Paul inspired in 2008 today are heavily involved in the liberty movement? They've started their own organizations. They've started their own blogs. They've done so much, and this is just the very beginning of what we're seeing, and there's so many more being planted this time. When these seeds really bloom in 10 to 20 years, I couldn't have fathomed this Ron Paul revolution. In 2006, if you told me that this would happen, I would say, you're crazy, it'll never happen. People hate liberty, and they're not, he'll get 1-2% of Republicans, and that's all he'll do, and he'll be ignored. I could not have imagined this, and just like we couldn't have imagined, say, the internet in 1985 and the way it changed our lives, we can't imagine what the liberty movement will look like in 10 to 20 years because of all these people who became involved.
One quick continuation comment, we'll get to that in a second, is the idea of youth. And these ideas will continue to grow because there's something about youth that is attracted to the ideas of liberty. when we're young, we see the world as it is. There's a certain objectivity that we have when we're younger. We're not tarnished by everything we've seen in life, and we can see hypocrisy when we're small children in a way that we may not notice as adults. Murray Rothbard, one of Ron Paul's intellectual mentors, has written some very interesting pieces about the attraction to liberty of those who are young. And when we think back to the way we were when we were young, perhaps we can understand why these ideas are so attractive to us.
Hey folks, I'm sorry. Someone shared something with us on Twitter that I think is fascinating. CNN, go to their main page and you'll see the totals coming in, and you'll see that there's Gingrich, Romney, and Santorum, and that's all. So it just really highlights the importance of what we're doing here. They've just erased Ron Paul. They really don't want us to think he matters, so that's fascinating and makes me so much all the more happy that we're doing what we're doing here.
Well, and this is great, just something hot off the press to add to this. This is straight off the Associated Press. I'll read from this. It's fascinating. South Carolina Attorney General informs Justice Department of dead voters. South Carolina Attorney General has notified the U.S. Justice Department of potential voter fraud. Attorney General Alan Wilson sent details of an analysis by the Department of Motor Vehicles to U.S. Attorney Bill Nettles. In a letter dated Thursday, Wilson says the analysis found 953 ballots cast by voters listed as dead. In 71% of those casts, ballots were cast between 2 months and 76 months after the people died. That means that they voted up to 6 1/3 years after their death. I'll suggest that probably wasn't Ron Paul that they were voting for. If I could throw that, the chances are pretty low. I know if I was dead, I would probably cast my ballot for Ron Paul, but that just goes to show that it's all is fair in love and war, but not in politics.
Well, guys, it looks like we have some more counties reporting, as you saw recently on the screen there. Gingrich, 39.5%, Romney, 27.8%, Santorum, 17.2%, Paul at 13%. We have Dan Johnson, who will be joining us in just a few minutes. He's on the ground in South Carolina, so stay tuned for that. It's funny you should say that CNN would be cutting off Ron Paul. It doesn't surprise me. Nothing surprises me anymore in this election cycle. But what doesn't surprise me is the amount of people that do flock to Paul's message. And when you investigate it, when you understand it, I think people have an inherent feeling in their gut, and they understand there is something wrong. And when they're searching for the candidate, they're searching for the message. When they stumble upon Ron Paul, it sticks. You can't get rid of it. You become exposed to this message of liberty, and it's infectious. And I think we're going to see that as these states and these other primaries come into line. We have Florida coming up. We have Nevada. Of course, Super Tuesday is a big day. And we don't know the future, but we do know that this movement has been in existence long before us, long before Ron Paul, and it started with the founders when they made this nation. And we're only continuing and perpetuating that message. And we just hope to see that the message is preserved at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue and lives on. So we're just moving along and broadcasting here. I got a message from our stream host that we had over 3,000 concurrent connections so far on this stream. So keep spreading the message. Keep sharing this link to your friends, to your family. Put it out on Facebook. Put it out on Twitter. Let people know what we're doing down here just outside of Chicago in Obama's backyard. So again, Gingrich is showing 39.5%. Romney, number 2. Santorum, 3, and Paul at 13%. But there's still multiple counties that have not reported in yet, and we have yet to see any conclusive results. Romney just gave an actual speech, and as soon as we have Paul's speech, we will bring that into you live, and we're waiting on Dan Johnson right now to bring us some people from the boots on the ground. Hopefully we'll have that in just a minute.
Gary, can you tell us how many, what's the percentage of reporting at this juncture?
Right now we're only seeing 10%, 10.9% reporting. It's low.
Yeah.
It's still low. I mean, when I cursor over some of these counties, it even says Spartanburg County, 6.1% reporting. Okay, 6.1% reporting, but they're already calling Newt Gingrich. So what that means is that these counties have not even completed counting all their votes. So this race is not over, and they're already stumping and taking on the first place positions. So again, Oconee County, 20% reporting. We'll look at Abbeville, 7.1% reporting. Newberry County, 3.3% reporting. So these counties have not even completed their count. So the race, in my opinion, in my optimistic opinion, is still up for grabs. And I just hope that it goes in the direction of my favorite candidate, Ron Paul.
So do we have a, looks like we have a live feed here from, do we have a live feed yet from the ground in South Carolina? I see it on the monitor here yet. Can you hear us?
Yes, I can.
So if you could explain to the viewers right now, where are you guys at and what's the feeling? Give us a little bit of feedback on what you're seeing now.
We're at Jillian's Billiard Hall in Columbia, South Carolina right now. As you can see from since the last time that I checked in with, it's up significantly. A lot more supporters have come in here, and there's a lot of energy where all the results are coming in on the TVs here, and we're expecting Dr. Paul to actually speak shortly. They're doing mic checks and preparing for that to happen right now. So it's pretty exciting and it's very energetic down here right now.
That's fantastic. And how are the demographics in the room where you're at right now? Pretty young, vibrant, mixed? What do you have?
We have a very vibrant, but we have a good mix of people. We have young people, we have old people, we have veterans. You know, people of all races and creeds are coming here, uniting under the message of liberty right now.
That's a strong message. And it looks like you have a couple supporters there with a Ron Paul sign. It's our view here is a little bit glared, but do they have anything that they'd like to add to this feed right now?
Yes, they do. Sorry,
I'm Zoe.
Robin, Handy.
telling me that you're from North Carolina, and you're currently pursuing a PhD in economics right now, inspired by Ron Paul and his message. You want to tell us a little bit about that?
I'm working on my doctorate in business. My focus is economics. I feel, after reading Dr. Paul's books, I feel that his sound economic principles, they really speak to what's going to happen in the future. Right now, a lot of the candidates are looking at the short term, but I'm looking at the long term. What's going to happen in the next 20, 30, 60, 70 years of my life? How is America going to be able to sustain itself in a global economy? Dr. Paul's ideas are so solid as to how we're going to not only cut the deficit, not add to it, and reduce taxes. I don't want to be burdened with more and more debt and see my paychecks turning us into a welfare warfare state. I want to be able to thrive on the principles of the Constitution, which this nation was.
So I actually
been involved.
I have a question, or perhaps a presumption. I'm going to assume, as a study of economics, that you're probably not a large Keynesian, I'd assume, but probably more along the lines of Karl Menger and Friedrich Hayek and Ludwig von Mises. Am I correct?
Yeah. How would you describe your economic leanings? You're not much of a Keynesian.
No, I mean I definitely think we need to go back to the goal-based standard, and we definitely need to at least audit the Federal Reserve. The statistics show that since the Federal Reserve's been in power, I mean, you've seen what it does. I can't provide the statistics right now with inflation. I think that we need to.
Oh, we're going to have to cut this short. It looks like they're warming up the room for Ron Paul right now.
All right, we'll come back to you soon. So enjoy the party, and we'll chat with you soon. So thank you very much for your time.
So I would like to touch base on something. You know, she had mentioned long term. And so, you know, maybe here's a question, you know, that I would tweet in and ask is, you know, we know we're at the brink of financial catastrophe here. You know, I mean, the numbers just show it. You know, we're borrowing more. We just raised the debt ceiling, $1.2 trillion. I mean, we're not cutting spending anywhere. I mean, we're actually going in a direction, you know, once, you know, I've even recently saw that India is, you know, breaking from the dollar. And, you know, there's other countries that are doing that. Once they all start doing that, we're really looking at a financial collapse. What happens, you know, with the movement or what have you when, you know, that happens? You know, where does this country stand at that juncture? And, you know, if you guys have any insight on, you know, how do we get out of it once we've pushed ourselves to that point?
I think a lot about it, and obviously being able to predict what would happen after inflationary collapse of fiat currencies and countries. It's not the first time it would have happened if it does happen. But history shows that, you know, the Weimar Republic, even in Argentina not too long ago, Nigeria recently, I think, went through a major inflationary collapse of the dollar. The countries do survive when that happens, but it's unpredictable because what you get out of the downside of a fiat currency collapse is political movements that might go one way or the other. And I think, you know, obviously I'm not sure any of us have a crystal ball. If I did, I'd be investing in that direction, but sure. It's the unknown that's scary.
Well, you know, Milton Friedman said whenever there's a crisis, the politicians are going to be desperate to find some way to stem the damage. When they do, they're going to look for what ideas are lying around. Well, thanks to Ron Paul, the ideas of Austrian economics are lying around. It's why we're hearing about it in the mainstream media. And it may well be that they'll go to it, not because they're ideologically converted, because they won't be, but simply out of desperation to limit the damage that's being done, because they know they're doing this damage. They know that the Fed causes inflation. They keep doing it, of course, because they can get away with it and it rewards their friends. But once their jobs are in danger, they're going to be desperate. They're going to be looking for a way out, and Ron Paul has shown them the way out. And they know, I think deep down, most of them know that he's right. They just don't have the guts. They're just too self-interested. But with the crisis, that could change.
Yes, and now hopefully it'll become more acceptable to talk about Ron Paul in the mainstream. That's why it's so important that these political pundits, while as much as they are ignoring him, even those who hate him as much as those on Fox News are beginning to give him some acknowledgement. And I think that's making it more acceptable to talk about Ron Paul in polite conversation and not be looked at as a kook. And the more people start to adopt these ideas and the more they inject themselves into the mainstream, I just think the safer we are for it.
Yeah. You know, there's one concern that I have with, you know, the state at what we are. You know, the economic state is certainly concerning, but the role that it has worldwide. You know, prior back, you know, historically when the Great Depression had happened, you know, people from the United States were able to, if they, you know, got their capital, they were able to leave the country, rebuild somewhere else, and then able to come back, you know, and do. Here we're so interlined.
Okay, Ron Paul's coming up on the feed, folks.
A long, hard slog. And we will continue to do this. There is no doubt about it. The message of liberty is being received by more people every single day, thanks to your effort. The wonderful thing about the message of liberty is if what we seek is peace and prosperity, that is how you get peace and prosperity, by understanding and defending and promoting the cause of liberty. You know, there's no doubt our numbers have been growing, whether it's this primary, but I've been in this business of promoting this cause in the electoral process for a long time. At the beginning, I thought it would be promotion of a cause. Then it dawned on me, if you win elections and win delegates, that's the way you promote a cause. So we will certainly be promoting this in the most frugal way. We will be going to the caucus station states, and we will be promoting the whole idea of getting more delegates, because that's the name of the game, and we will pursue it. Or 30 years ago, I started, and I didn't think it would be well received, and obviously getting elected 12 times meant the people who knew me best voted for the cause of liberty, and this cause has continued to grow. Even compared to 4 years ago, it looks like tonight we will get 4 to 5 times more votes than we did 4 years ago. So there's every reason to be encouraged. There's every reason that we understand so clearly that the cause is so necessary. This is what I noticed about 4 years ago. After the last election, our efforts were getting more and more attention. And everybody asked me, the media asked me, what is different? Well, the evidence has become clear that the efforts by government is failing, and we can't depend on the government to take care of us from cradle to grave. We can't depend on the government on its efforts to promote and believe that we can police the world and go into nation building, because we're all gone broke. lot about the economy and how we got into the mess and what we should do about it. Others have talked about it in glib terms and not be specific. But I see our problems as a spending problem. Government is too big. We do more things, all the things we're not supposed to do, and we forget about doing the things we're supposed to be doing. So, as a modest attempt to get back to reasonable budgets, we want to have a $1 trillion cut in spending in 1 year. Of course, there is one other little item that I've talked about, not for this campaign, not for the last campaign, but for the last 30 years. Matter of fact, it motivated me in many ways to run for Congress. And then it has to do with how do we get away with paying for these bills and endless spending occurs and government keeps growing. It cannot occur if you have a sound monetary system. That is why I have emphasized the importance of having a sound dollar and why we need to rein in the Federal Reserve System. Pose against us for talking about the gold standard is they said it's too complex and it's risky business. But what can be more ridiculous than saying, oh, money comes out of a printing press and it should be done in secret, creating trillions of dollars and passing them out to the special interests, and we're supposed to accept that as a good monetary system. And you know, it isn't all that complex. Matter of fact, if we obeyed the law, we would have sound money. The Constitution still says that only gold and silver should be legal tender. But if one understands this, you can understand why government grows, because politicians don't have to be responsible. There's various reasons why they spend money, but if they, you know, to one degree they can tax us, but there's a limit to how much, because there'll be a tax rebellion. And they can borrow, and they can get away with that as long as the credit's good. But eventually interest rates go up. That's why they invented in 1913 this financial system based on fiat money and printing money, because you can delay the pain and penalty. And I used to say so often over the years that, you know, we run up these debts and we pass them on to the next generation. We shouldn't do it. But you know what? What's different today? We are the next generation, and we're suffering the consequences. This is the reason that we cannot resolve the problem of the unfinanced entitlement system, Social Security and all, because if you just print money, the value of the money goes down and the people's standards go down. Already the people on fixed incomes, their standard of living is going down. The middle class is shrinking. Unemployment, if you look at those honestly, is closer to 20%, and the people are very, very concerned about this. The answers come with a very uncomplicated solution. We got into this mess by too many people in Washington either didn't care or didn't understand the Constitution. We need to restore the Constitution, and we will restore liberty. In order to do that, we should spend all our resources here at home. That's a good place to spend the money. This is also the reason I have emphasized so strongly about the waste and the amount of money we spend overseas and the foreign aid. At the same time, our people are suffering here at home. So if we want to spend the money, we should work hard to return the money from overseas spending to the people here in this country, and they should spend the money. But in order to do this, we all know that it is not so simple. You don't wave a wand. You have to change the people's attitude, and that is what's happening. The people's attitudes are changing, and they're realizing that we can't afford this any longer. Even the people who are on the receiving end know they're getting into trouble because the producers have been pushed out of our country. So this is becoming the opportunity for us to restore the values that had made America great. And it's based on individual liberty. It's based on on the concept that we are free people with free spirits. We should have control of our lives, and we should have a control of our destiny, but we also should have control of our money as well. This will not be done because government does reflect the prevailing attitudes of the people. Where we are gaining now is the prevailing attitude of the people is changing, and that is very good because it's coming our way and saying government is the problem, it is not the solution. We got into this mess by too much spending and too much debt and too much printing money and too much regulation. How do they think they're going to get out of this mess? By spending more money, printing more money, borrowing more money, and regulating more. It's impossible. That is why we have to reverse the course. In foreign policy, we need a foreign policy, not so strange, but one that the founders gave us, one that the Constitution designed. One that is designed to operate in our self-interest, for our national security. That's the kind we have. I think a simple little thing to avoid going into these wars that never seem to end, that they never seem to stop, and we never know why we're there and what the purpose is. Founders gave us the answer. Don't go to war unless the war is declared. Go to war, win them, and come home. So that's a good place to start. Bring the troops home and have them spend their money here, not overseas. Entitlement system, it doesn't work. It's all well intended. Oh yes, everybody's going to get a house, and everybody's going to get free health care, everybody's going to get a free education, and look at what we have. All it does is when you pump more money into any area, you get higher prices. So the more the government pumps money into education or medicine, the costs go up, but you don't get higher quality or better distribution. Unfortunately, our country has been very lackadaisical, and this is what we're reviving, and that is we're lackadaisical about our understanding and our trust in freedom. This is what we need. We need to restore the confidence that if we want a free and prosperous society, we have to understand the necessity of assuming responsibility for ourselves. Of course, the one other area that bothers me significantly is when we accept the role of big government in economics or in overseas, inevitably it undermines our personal liberties, and that is being attacked now. Always with good intention, but in the last 10 or 12 years, we have embarked on a road that is undermining our liberties. When you think of the harm done and the threat to our privacy with the Patriot Act, that has literally canceled out the Fourth Amendment. We need to reverse that and get rid of the Patriot Act is what I think we should do. One place where, when the people spoke out, we have achieved a lot. And there's a few people in this room, I'm quite sure, are computer savvy and internet savvy. And when they threatened with Stop Online Gambling, act, which was to take over the internet, guess what? You all spoke out, and at least temporarily, it has been removed from the docket in Washington, both in the House and the Senate. So that is an achievement. When the people speak out, you can get their attention in Washington. But we also need to continue to speak out against what that paragraph they put in the National Defense Authorization Act. That provision that now allows our president to use our military to arrest American citizens with no charges and no attorneys. Now, I got a little bit of criticism from the media, and I really worry a lot about that. But I took a day this week and went back up to Washington. I voted to make sure that I was on record to vote against increasing the national debt by $1.2 trillion. But also, while there, I dropped a piece of legislation in I think is very significant, and I hope we gain the momentum because so many people in the campaign has been aware of this, although it's not noticed much in the mainstream media. And that is, I introduced a bill to repeal that provision and remove that power from our president. Our cause is the right cause because it's the cause that made America great. Freedom is the answer to so many of our problems. If you think about diversity in a country as our country is, freedom brings people together. Because what we do is we release the creative energy of each individual to pursue their life as they choose. Their lifestyles, their religious values, their personal values will be determined by that individual as long as they don't interfere with others. This brings people together. Economically, it should be the same issues, social issues and economic issues. You should have not only right to your life and your own practices, but you should have a right to spend your money as you choose. This is what we have to do. And we did have the best experiment ever. We were the richest country ever. We had the largest middle class ever. And now it is changing. And it's been systematically changing over quite a few decades. So we have to reverse that because right now the middle class is shrinking, the country is poorer, and the prosperity we have is basically based on debt. We owe so much money to overseas. We have now, I mean, ironically and unfortunately, the Chinese have become our banker. I mean, what is going on with us? Why don't we produce the conditions in the environment to invite capital and investments back into this country? That's what we need. The issues you all know very well. The country is coming our way. This campaign has a long way to go. The momentum is growing. The one thing we can say about our campaign, have you ever noticed other candidates going up and then down, up and then down? So far, I am very proud to say that our efforts is steady growth. It's steady growth like this. And that's the way it's going to continue because that is what is necessary. There is a great need for it, and the opportunity is there. And let me tell you how proud I am of all the supporters and all the efforts made in this. And just believe me, thank you very much. Keep up the good work. We have the message, we have the talent, we have the determination, and we will win this battle for peace and prosperity. Thank you.
Well, you heard Congressman Ron Paul, who's come in fourth in this South Carolina primary, saying he will go on. His message, as it has been throughout this campaign, one of promoting liberty and limiting...
All right, that was Ron Paul. You heard him. Fourth place, they're calling it now on Fox, but as you can see, we still have 31% only reporting in South Carolina. Gingrich is coming in at 40%, Romney 26%, Santorum 17.9%, and Paul at 13.4%. Lisa Wogan is joining us now at the news desk. Lisa, what are your thoughts on the evening so far and Ron Paul's statements?
You know, I'm always encouraged to hear him. You know, his message is just always encouraging to and he always maintains his positivity, even though we might be a little deflated that we didn't come in first. He realizes that this is a 50-state process, and he's thinking ahead to the future, to Florida and Nevada and beyond, realizing that this is a marathon and not a sprint.
And I think that's what's essentially important. There's a good component about this race, and the one element is that Gingrich is at top. Now, Gingrich has, in the prior with Iowa and with New Hampshire, polled pretty low. He was pretty low. So now for him to beat, or to be at least ahead of Mitt Romney, in this election in this primary is really interesting because it now slows Mitt Romney. Ron Paul will continue to get more, and then delegates. And so we could talk now about the importance of this delegate component and how really on a large scale of the 50-state, election process, how South Carolina is really small. I mean, it's really kind of, a nook of, what the whole race is.
You hit the nail on the head, and I think this is a good time to recap the importance of this delegate process and to talk about that and really frame what's ahead. And Ron Paul's campaign has really been brilliant in this election cycle, understanding it's all about the delegates. For example, let's go back to Iowa. Iowa itself, the Iowa caucus was basically a straw poll. No delegates were selected there. Yeah. The delegates stayed after the caucuses that night to get on the ballot to be able to become the delegate. So Ron Paul could easily take Iowa, a great organization there. He made sure that his people were there. And to put this in perspective, let's recap before we have the official breakdown of South Carolina, obviously, because it's not completed. When we take a look here, just taking a look on the internet right now, the pledged delegate totals before South Carolina, we have Mitt Romney at 14, Ron Paul at 10, Newt Gingrich at 2, Rick Santorum at 7. Now, South Carolina itself is a 25 delegate state, followed up by Florida, which is 50. So we'll go to those two states. But when you take a look at some of the other bigger states and the delegate count that's there, where Ron Paul has a strong presence, really good ground game. Actually, he has great ground game in every state, and we'll talk about even Illinois here, where we have 54 delegates on the slate, full ballot. You've got Texas with 155 delegates, where Ron took in 2008 he definitely had a strong presence, and this time around it will be fantastic. You've got, I think, California at 176 I think delegates. New York, huge numbers out of these other states where it's critical. And so again, like we were saying earlier, I don't think this is a moment to be deflated at all. I think this is strategic from his campaign, understanding they could have spent a lot of money in South Carolina and Florida trying to get a small delegate count, when at the end, that is the number. And so they've run a really strong campaign, and they really know what they're doing.
Yeah, it's really a strategic movement on the part of the campaign. It's very smart campaigning. To look at each individual state, see how many delegates come out of each, how much money you're going to pump into trying to pull out the votes there. And in addition to there only being 25 delegates that can come out of South Carolina, you got to figure South Carolina is very heavily military. They may not buy so much Ron Paul's foreign policy. They do tend to follow the neocon policy, a very strong presence around the world. So I think on the whole it was a very smart move of the campaign to stay away, spend very little there, focus on states like Nevada, where there's a number of different offices and individuals that are in the office, boots on the ground in other different states. Now you also figure California. I think you said.
Oh,
California.
did you see the response when he went out there for the straw poll in California? I don't know if anybody here has seen that, but if you had the chance to see his response, and I have family in California and a lot of friends, and very Ron Paul friendly, and that's a delegate-rich state. I mean, that could really trump something like this. When the official breakdown comes down, obviously it's not completed, but we'll find out later, and we're going to stay through this. So this, we were noticing some tweets, and the reason we wanted to bring this up is that a lot of people were saying they couldn't believe the results, and we talked about the Associated Press thing earlier, where dead people are voting. We live in Illinois here. Obviously, that's probably not news to us that things like that happen in our election cycles, but really their strategy is the right one, and it's not popularity vote, it's a delegate count strategy, and their campaign is running really solid on that.
Yeah, and then that other component, and just to highlight it on again, for the small bit, what really is good that comes out of this is, Newt Gingrich running right now in first. That really kind of diminishes that fire that Mitt Romney, so that the media can run with it and say, Mitt Romney's taken it, he's won the first 3, he's going to take it. This really is very helpful for Ron Paul in the sense that it lightens that, and we know, we here in the Ron Paul supporters know, and a lot of the educated campaign followers understand that, if you look at each and every state, Ron Paul, Mitt Romney are the only ones slated in every single state with delegates in every single state. So at the end of the day, when the other Santorums fall off, the Newt Gingrich falls off, it's going to come right back down to, so this helps us significantly that, Romney is, polling low. When, later on when the year comes, depending on maybe the economy, if the economy's, weakens some more, we'll see kind of how things go with that. But I think this is actually pretty promising, considering, we're this South Carolina.
And to make a correction, the number for California is 172 delegates, so I'm not sure if I got that number right earlier, but I just found it now. It's a pretty significant slate. And the point is that, like we mentioned earlier, there's 500 delegates that can't go to Newt Gingrich or Santorum because they're not on the ballot. And so ultimately, they can't win the nomination. And that's a really important point to make. And we're going to go into some of the things. I think Lisa wants to cover some of the activity, how you can get involved, but we're going to go to Gary first.
All right, folks. Looks like so far we've got 40.1% reporting. Gingrich is still taking the majority of the votes at 40.1%. Romney, 26.5%. Santorum at 18.0%. Paul at 13.4%. Now, for those out there that have not seen our ad, The Compassion of Dr. Paul, I'm going to play it for you. It's only about 2 minutes. This is the long-form ad, and then also we have an exclusive video of Ron Paul's wife, the next First Lady, Carol Paul, actually reacting to the ad. In this ad specifically, the Revolution PAC spent $35,000 of the donations that came in to support that ad, as well as another ad called Adherence to the Oath. We can play that for you a little bit later. But I want to jump to the compassion of Dr. Paul and Carol Paul's reaction.
It was between 1972 and 73, but it was still a lot of prejudice around this area. My wife was sick, and I was trying to get some attention for her. Nobody came to check. They just left her there. Well, I believe I was left there because of the difference, me being black and her being white, and every time I would say something to the head nurse, she would get pretty upset. And then she finally called the Freeport Police Department, said I was harassing her. And I mean, I didn't know anything to do. Well, then Ron Paul come to my rescue. He just stepped in and went to work with my wife. And after he seen her, I'd say no more than 10 minutes later, she had a stillborn boy child. And he said, as far as the bill, he would take care of everything, which he did. I never got a bill from the hospital or anything. And he was a doctor of medicine, and that's what he was doing, was practicing medicine, and it didn't matter who and what and why. He was doing it because he think of one human being just as much as another one. He's just an honest man, and that's something we need now in this day and time. It's a lot of politics and no honesty. When you have honesty, well, people will try to do anything to blot you out, and that's what they will try to do to him, is blot him out, because he will be honest, and they need more like him.
Click here to donate to help get James' story broadcast on television.
Oh. Did you see that ad about how he helped out with the medical payment from an African-American gentleman?
Oh, yes, I did. I did see that.
What did you think of the ad?
I thought it was a great ad. But, you know, it was like an everyday occurrence with him, because that's how he practiced medicine, and that's how he took care of his patients. If somebody needed him, he was there. I mean, it didn't matter whether they were going to pay or not going to pay. If they were, you know, if they needed a doctor, you know, and he was there. I do think it's a great ad, and they caught what is just the really true Ron Paul.
Some people might be surprised, you know, Ron Paul's written many books, I think. Why does he never brag about these kind of things in his books?
Oh, he's not really that kind of guy. I mean, he you know, tries to do the best for everybody, and he says it's not about him, it's about our country, and that's what he's worried about. So, yes, I mean, we could be sitting home with our feet up right now,
our country,
enjoying our grandkids,
exactly.
But he cares too much about our country, and, you know, so here we are.
Click here to donate to help get James' story broadcast on television.
We were brought up loving our country, that in the United States of America we were free. And that's an attitude that we've tried to instill in our children. I met my wife in the Air Force. I was a combat pilot in Vietnam. I served in Desert Storm as a commander. When I graduated from the academy, I took the oath of office. And as a commander, I administered that oath to many people. Now I wonder about the understanding people have of our Constitution, and I think about our candidates for President of the United States. It's interesting to see the support Ron Paul gets from the military. And if we think back to the code of conduct and people raising their right hand that they were going to support and defend the Constitution of the United States, why would those same people support in great numbers Ron Paul? I think it's because they've raised their right hands and they're putting their lives on the line for us here in the United States. And they know that Ron Paul does the same.
Click here to donate to television broadcast that lets people know Ron Paul receives more donations from active duty military than all other Republican candidates combined.
All right, well, welcome back. Thank you very much for coming back. And so I think to go down the line that we were talking about, the importance of this delegate process. Fortunately, in the panel right now, there's actually 3 delegates here in the state of Illinois. Lisa Metcalf-Hogan is, Aaron Gallagly, I am myself, and actually we have somebody over in the sound room as a delegate too. So there's actually 4 people here that are delegates for the campaign this time. And to give you some insight on how to do that, Lisa's going to share some of her ideas, how you can get involved and what you can do to help Ron Paul become the nomination at the convention in Florida.
Well, thanks, Forrest. I just want to stress, I think it's important at this time to stress that, you know, the popular vote is kind of what's exciting and what people and what the general public is watching right now. But the subtext of this whole campaign is the delegate process, which we're all involved in. Every single state works differently. So what we would encourage, you know, we're all actively working in Illinois. Illinois primary is not for a couple months now, but a couple months is not really very much time to get your organization together. And so we're planning on working on here in Illinois pretty steadily for the next couple months to get the vote out for Ron Paul. And I think whether you're in a primary state or whether you're in a caucus state, there's something that you can be doing to get the vote out for Ron Paul in an organized and strategic way. And the first thing I would say is, you know, inform yourself on the primary or caucus process in your state. A lot of you probably already are informed, but you know, I would say that one thing that's really important for us as leaders in the movement is to, you know, as we're attempting to do, is to be kind of the authority for Ron Paul, the authority for the Republican nomination, the primary process in your specific locality. That might be in your county, it might be in your precinct, but to kind of take ownership of this in your area. And we can talk a little bit about what we're doing here in Illinois. We do have kind of the list of the upcoming primaries and caucuses, but like I said, the very most important thing to do initially is to figure out, you know, where your state falls in that process. And I've been redirected to another camera. Thank you. Find out where your state falls in that process, and you know, activate yourself within an existing organization, or you might have to start the organization. Yeah. You know,
and like we did here,
right.
a friend asked me. A friend asked, "Would you run for delegate in your area?" And the same for Aaron as well. We all have full-time jobs. We're all, you know, really busy at what we're doing. But we felt like it was a sacrifice that we had to make. And when we looked at Ron Paul, you know, for 30 years, 3 decades, that guy fought the system. He fought everybody, and that to me was an inspiration. In between really 2 full-time jobs for me.
Exactly.
And so what we did is we organized. We had a grassroots movement here in Illinois. Illinois, as you may or may not know, obviously the Barack Obama state's relatively democratic. Probably not as conservative as some other areas in the country. And so we had to organize our own, in each one of our districts, organize our signature drive to get on the ballot as the delegates. And so we did that grassroots. We took care of it, got a full slate in the state of Illinois. Not all the candidates can say that's in the prime. So again, going back to the total delegate count that can happen, Illinois is a state that could affect that. And so in order to do that, we all stepped up and did our organization within our districts. When you break it down into smaller units, it's a bit easier. And so, you know, we might have some perspective on how you did that or how you did that. And truly the point to take away from this is that the delegates count. The popular votes that everyone goes online and clicks. Yeah. Well, for every Ron Paul supporter that's out there that just floods the online polls and just knocks it out of the park, that passion is out there. But if we can step away from our computers and become engaged in different ways, then we have the potential to shape history. And so, looks like we have, what's this? Oh, got to let you know, we just, this is a great note for those of you in the Liberty Movement. Peter Schiff will be on in 10 minutes, founder of Euro Pacific Capital. If you don't know who Peter Schiff is, I guarantee probably all you do, but if you don't, you're going to want to tune in because Peter is quite a guy. So Peter Schiff and 10. So back to the delegate council. We'll cover this for 10 minutes, and we'll have Peter Schiff on and ask some questions. So tell us, some of your...
Really, in perspective, if you look historically at the Ron Paul movement, it's been significantly grassroots. This is the first time this election process here that there's been more foundation, but it's still ultimately grassroots. And it goes... I live in Chicago. I live in a very Democratic-based city, but it doesn't mean that the Democrats wouldn't be open to Ron Paul's philosophy. Oftentimes, it's just educating them to a new, different philosophy, the economic philosophy. Oftentimes, that turns people. Additionally, people that are against the wars. There's a number of different ways that you can get involved. Now, you can do it grassroots-wise, get a group of people together, knock on doors and do that. There's always that element. You can also go to schools, talk to special interest groups. If you have communities that have homeschooling, he's a big proponent of that. He's a voice for those communities. You have other, churches, you can discuss with them, his foreign policy and how it's more in line with Christian values. There's an assortment of things that you can do. I've even found useful on Facebook and all the other different devices, Twitter, posting Ron Paul. I tend to post Ron Paul videos of him speaking because I think he speaks for himself. I couldn't even do remotely, move people remotely the way that he does. So there's an assortment of ways that each individual, if you can't get connected with a group, you can do it individually. Every vote that turns at least changes people to the ideas of the movement, and that's ultimately, Ron Paul is the source of this message we're all trying to spread. So as many people as we can spread to, it'd be, beneficial for everybody.
Yeah, and I just want to jump in. I've worked on a number of different campaigns at this point, congressional, local campaigns, and I'm trying to figure out which camera. And what we do know, the common theme when you're working a ground game is that reaching out to voters directly works. So we know reaching out to voters directly in your neighborhood and reaching out to your personal, your personal sphere of influence is, makes a difference in the voting, the results on election day. It's proven time and again. We're up against a national media that is not real, comfortable with the Ron Paul movement, yet I think we're seeing this year, since Ron Paul's, his outcome has been 3 times what it was in 2008, that the outreach efforts are bearing fruit now. And the people that I think that we need to reach out to at this point, I personally have had tons of people say, I hear about Ron Paul, he's great. Now, those people do not know when the election is. I can guarantee you that. They do not know.
March 20 here.
No, it's March 20th in Illinois. We know when it is. But I think if a person in the Ron Paul movement really wanted to make an impact, one thing would be, like I said, educate yourself on when your primary is, your caucus process is, and then you need to follow up with people. Remind them, maybe send a weekly message to them, let them know what's going on with the campaign. Then absolutely, in the final couple weeks, last week, you have to get them to the polls. Because believe it or not, there are, Ron Paul supporters who will not get, even among people we probably interact with.
You get them going, they don't make it. And as a matter of fact, I think this is real quickly, Super Tuesday is that first week in March 6th, in which a large slate of delegates are going to be selected in states. I'm just going to run down the list so that those of you watching that want to get involved know that you're coming up soon and it's your time to act. And so basically, following up South Carolina, January 31st we have Florida, February 4th we have Nevada, February 4th through 11th we have Maine, February 7th is Colorado and Minnesota, February 25th is the North Mariana Islands. I didn't even realize that they had delegates. February 28th is Arizona and Michigan, and then sorry for anybody from North Mariana Islands that are listening. March 3rd is Washington. Super Tuesday, March 6th, this is huge, this is big. Right. Alaska, Georgia, Idaho, Massachusetts, North Dakota, Ohio, Oklahoma, Tennessee, Vermont, and the good old Thomas Jefferson state of Virginia.
Those are big states for
and
Ron
those are
Paul.
big states.
All
and
of
Virginia,
them.
the only two on the ballot are Mitt Romney and Ron Paul.
Right.
And Virginia, for example, we're talking about, that's 49 delegate votes right now. That's going to get split between...
And a number of those you mentioned on that list are states that Ron Paul did exceedingly well in those are the ones he maybe, finished second last time around. Some of the western states, Alaska, he did well, Idaho, some of the freer thinking states.
And so the time is to get engaged now.
Right, the time is now,
Find your local precinct leaders, get on the boards, find out is anybody taking charge, and if they're not, get in charge. Get in contact with the campaign, find out what you can do to make sure that you're supporting the delegates here. Both Aaron, Lisa, and myself are running our own grassroots campaign here. We're all on the ballot as delegates for Ron Paul. Each one of our districts. I have 2. I think, are you or 3 or 4 and 2? So, and the sound man keeps waving. He's
like he wants to be sure.
The fourth, he's with us in spirit.
Even if you can't if you can't take part, or everybody's got a little different thing. Some people like to go door to door. They like to talk. They know the issues very well. Some people don't. So there's other different areas that you can either help grassroots or you can help the campaign. You could do the phone banking. That helps the campaign significantly. Finding the Ron Paul supporters so that come election day, they can send out mass texts, mass phone calls to get those voters out there. So there's an assortment of things that you can do if you can't get creative. I saw on YouTube there was this fabulous video in Florida of a big parade, and it was packed of Ron Paul supporters of Ron Paul parade, and it was just packed with people. So you can't leave anything to the grassroots because they're entirely creative, and that's essentially what's got this movement going.
I think we have the star of the show here.
Here's the next the youngest member of the Ron Paul Revolution. Here's little G, and he's got his little Ron Paul T-shirt on, and he's cheering along with us, and we figured we'd bring him out for his debut performance. Right now, the South Carolina primary results: 55.3% reporting. Gingrich still first place, 40.2%. Romney 26.7%, and there was a third place candidate, but his name escapes me now. But Paul is at 13.4%.
Right, so thanks for the update. Again, these are just counts and delegates, unknown at this point from South Carolina to finish out. But we have Peter Schiff coming up here in a couple minutes. But the important thing to walk away, and something else that I think is important too, revolutionpac.com. I mean, what they're allowing us to come here, and we just found out this week, to come here and speak to you from a liberty perspective. Take your tweets. I'm going through your tweets. I love the feedback you're giving us. Yeah, I understand my mic was too loud. Thank you. We're reading all of them as much as we can, trying to respond to them. Aaron's was too low.
Do they have any questions about the delegate
process? They've been asking a whole bunch. Yeah, and so if you have a question, can you provide a list of the primaries and dates with the number of delegates up for grabs in one place? I can show you. That's an excellent tweet and question. The site that I've been looking at here, as a matter of fact, someone corrected me and said California is 178. What I have listed here was 176, but I'll just direct you to it. Actually, I'm just going to wikipedia.org, wiki results of the 2012 Republican Party presidential primaries. You can look at that while we're looking at it. Give us some feedbacks, your thoughts on this. Strategically tell us what you're doing. Maybe there's some other delegates here that are listening right now to the Revolution PAC feed. Tell us your stories or your stories of how you came to Ron Paul and the ideals of liberty and what you think you could do to make this a better movement. We have some questions coming in here. Field them.
Here, how about the second one?
So we got again, we love this interaction with you guys. Talk more about telling your reps what bills you want to pass, because people seem to have forgotten about that. I think I saw this a tweet earlier. Of course, that's very important, and I think just this last week, the Stop Online Piracy Act, you saw the massive feedback from companies and people that started calling their reps saying this bill is clearly not in the direction that we want to go. It's a violation of liberties and freedom for people, and none of us here would have been in favor of that bill, of course. And so you guys made a difference, and so they're having to step back, and there was a major shift within a day with enough people causing that to happen. So the same thing can happen with Ron Paul. Whether these bills, I think most on this panel here, we probably see eye to eye on about just every bill that comes across the board about NDAA or SOPA or PIPA or whatever else are going to feed, any acronyms are going to feed us that are all bad. It'd be nice to repeal. So.
And and oftentimes what's scary that I've noticed, being an attorney, is, some of the, and I think it goes back to really capturing the basis of, what's the government's role in our lives. Here in Illinois, we just recently, there was a bill that's passed that there's a fine if you don't shovel your snow. I mean, things I think have gotten to, and then I saw on CNN yesterday that they were talking about.
I'm getting fined.
Yeah. They talked about banning people wearing pajamas in public. So, I mean, I think we're at a great time in this movement that over the years we've deviated so far away from what the Constitution and our sound liberties that it's a really good time, I think. It's much easier to talk to people about the issues. It's much easier to talk to people about, the economic philosophies, monetary policy, even the foreign policy. I think people, are starting to come around to it. We would hope that, after Iraq and people saw, that there was this, drumming up this war talk about, nuclear weapons, and, afterwards, how they kind of backpedaled and said, you think that there'd be a number of people that would have opened their eyes, but, there's still people along the way that we just keep, continuously need to educate on the issues, and really just kind of trying to push back to, the government having less involvement in our individual and daily lives.
Well, again, even like my story earlier, I was one of those people. So I tend to be a little more, I think, understanding of people that aren't quite there, and people that have grown up their whole life in Liberty families. There might be a number of you out there. I wasn't that guy. I came around to it, and again, to me, Ron Paul is kind of the true golden rule and example of how there was a man 30 years alone that fought the single no vote in Congress on a number of occasions, that was ridiculed and called every name in the book and just ignored. And what's happening today, he's reshaping the culture of America in an amazingly positive way. Federal Reserve is all Ron Paul. It's all Ron Paul.
I want him to jump in, but I want to jump off that point real quick. That Ron Paul has been, working alone in this for 30 years, and this is the pinnacle of Ron Paul's career. And I think this is kind of like I don't want to say our one chance. But this is such an opportunity for us to get involved in whatever way that we possibly can, to do whatever we possibly can. I know all of us, you work during the day, you take care of kids, whatever. The sacrifice, I think, is so worth it because we're so incredibly close now, closer than we've been in, our lifetimes and beyond. That I just encourage people to get active.
I can at least speak for Illinois. It has been such a fabulous movement here in Illinois because, initially when I started, I was calling everything under the sun, trying to find out what I can do for Ron Paul. He was like, I got to get this guy in office. And so, it evolved, and as it started to take its presence, each district had a leader, there was conference calls, and it's even grown significantly now where, there's a number of different volunteers, a great support here in Illinois for, each group. And in addition to the excitement that it has for the campaign, at least locally for us, the excitement that it just has to meet so many like-minded individuals that really get the issues, that really, really, truly believe in the truth and what this country was founded on, and really truly providing a life for every American that's the most prosperous out there. We've been, I think, like I've said before, over the decades we've been kind of pounded in our head through mainstream media, and now I've finally realized the impact mainstream media has in encouraging the lifestyles that we have, and now it's trying to unwind all that. And I think that Ron Paul has done such a great job in really kind of getting us back on track.
When you talk about the example that Ron Paul has set for 30 years, it's not just about politics, but what he's really, the core of what he's done, the most important thing he's done is to put out the message consistently for all those years. He happens to have had a high-profile platform, but what he had to do first and foremost to get to that point, I'll talk about that later. I see we have Peter Schiff coming up, and let's go to Peter Schiff.
Can you hear us, Peter?
I might as well. We might as well. Yeah. Hold on. I'm trying to see if I can get this. Nah, there's just really lots of. Turn those lights are no good. Nah, it's not. I don't think it's going to work, Paul. With this camera.
Oh, he's not really ready yet.
Well, we can get back to that if you wanted to finish.
I'll turn to my thought, I guess. No, my thought was, what Ron Paul did first and foremost was he educated himself about the principles of libertarianism. He educated himself about Austrian economics. And yes, by all means, you should be a delegate and do whatever you can if you can. But for the long-term good of this movement, what we really all need to do, first and foremost, is learn more so that we can be effective communicators, effective advocates.
Absolutely.
And that requires study. It requires reading books, such as Ron Paul's book, Liberty Defined. If you haven't read that, I strongly recommend it. You could check out my book, Libertarianism Today, if you like. Some have said it is helpful. You can Henry Hazlitt's Economics in One Lesson. Go to the important websites.
Bastiat's the Law.
Yeah, Bastiat's the Law. Yeah. Fee.org, the Foundation for Economic Education. See what's there. Mises.org from the Ludwig von Mises Institute. Learn the liberty principles first and foremost, and the rest will follow.
Is Peter with us? Can you hear us, Peter?
Yeah, I'm here.
Well, thanks for joining us. Where are you at right now, Peter?
Yeah, our studio is all up or offline. None of the cameras are working. I'm in my studio, but I'm not using any of the right equipment, so the lighting is off, the cameras are off, because I'm just using a laptop computer, and the actual internet is many floors above me, so it's probably a very weak connection.
Well, hey, thanks for joining us, Peter. We really appreciate your time. You're definitely, everybody on the panel here has admired your work and seen you and read your books, and so it's really great for you to take some time out and give your perspective on this current race for the primaries and Ron Paul's position. And so we'd like you to basically tell us what you see this time around and let the people outside of the pack here understand your feelings watching this race go.
Well, I don't think it's that much of a disappointment. I know, Ron is coming in fourth out of a field of four. People might, be disenchanted with that finish. But I think if you're a Ron Paul supporter, the fact that Romney did not win is a good thing, because, there was a Romney express train that needed to be derailed. And now that Gingrich has won one, those are delegates that did not fall into the Romney column. And the thing is, we want to make sure that none of the candidates has enough delegates to win this thing outright at the convention. I think that's, that would be a good outcome for Ron Paul to come to the convention with none of the candidates. Obviously, the best would be if Ron could win it, but the likelihood is that it's probably not going to happen. Although I'm not going to give up hope. But if nobody has a majority, then there's some opportunity there at that convention for a lot of good things to happen.
Now, what are your general thoughts on a brokered convention in that case that comes that there's no way that Mitt Romney or whoever the candidate will be? What platform and what type of brokering do you think that Ron Paul could actually get? I mean, that's a hot topic.
He could be in the position of kingmaker. If he doesn't win, he could have a lot of influence in the party on who the nominee is and what will he get in exchange. And it'd be nice to have Ron Paul sit down with candidates and vet them and actually you figure out who Ron Paul would like to see be the standard bearer if it's not him. And I think it'd be nice if he was in a position to pick the nominee or maybe help pick the running mate of the nominee. And who knows, Rand Paul, I think, would make an excellent choice for a VP. And so that would be a great outcome, even if Ron does not win. But I'm not going to throw in the towel and concede. A lot can happen, as Ron said in his speech today, and I thought he did a very good speech. He delivered there in prime time. It's early. We barely have chosen any delegates, maybe 2% of the delegates. So there's a long primary season ahead. A lot can happen. Gingrich won today, but I think he was able to turn the situation around. I was at that debate live in South Carolina, and I think that initially Newt Gingrich really won the people by vilifying the media, CNN, turning that situation with his ex-wife around. But I think as time goes by, as these stories begin to circulate, I think he's going to lose some of that momentum, and he'll start to actually lose some support based on some of these marital problems. Initially, he was able to turn it around, but over time, I think it will weigh on him, particularly among female voters. I think maybe it didn't make a big deal in South Carolina. But I think as time goes on, it will. And of course, if he is pressed by the Romney camp, to come clean, he's putting a lot of pressure on Mitt Romney about his tax returns. Well, okay, what about his deal with Fannie and Freddie Mac? Let's see the terms of that. Let's also see what happened with the ethics investigation when he was a speaker. I think there's a lot of skeletons yet to come out of that closet. And of course, he's going to continue to put pressure on Mitt Romney, which would allow Ron Paul to continue to build on his momentum and garner more and more support as this contest continues.
Well, yeah, go ahead, please, Lisa.
No, we have a question for you. We're talking about outreach to potential voters here in the upcoming primaries and caucuses, and a lot of what Ron Paul talks about can go over the head of people who aren't well read in all of if you had to break down into maybe 3 talking points, kind of have an elevator speech ready so people are prepared to kind of speak to the general public about some of these critical issues, how would you break that down? What would you suggest?
Well, I think the most important thing that we need to do is and Ron Paul needs to do a better job on this himself, is to let the voters know that Ron Paul is not soft on national defense, that he wants a strong America, and that as president he will defend America and protect American citizens. He understands that national defense is the main purpose constitutionally of the federal government. And that's what Ron Paul wants the federal government to be doing, is focusing on national defense. Because there are a lot of people, a lot of Republicans who are with Ron Paul on economic matters, but they don't support him because they misunderstand his foreign policy. And I think if you look at the interview I had with Steve Forbes on my radio show last week, and you can see we put a video, the interview on Shift Report on YouTube. Steve Forbes endorsed me when I ran for Senate. He endorsed Ron for president, even though he sees eye to eye with Ron Paul on a lot of things. And there are a lot of people like Steve Forbes that would support Ron Paul, but for the foreign policy. And I just think there's a misunderstanding there on the foreign policy. People somehow think that if Ron Paul is the president, we're sending a message to terrorists that it's open season on Americans. That's not what we're doing. Ron Paul isn't against defense. He's against wasting money and calling it defense. He's against, the military-industrial complex, and he's against meddling in the affairs of other nations when it's none of our business. He's against nation building, but he wants to defend our nation. He wants to defend the United States. And what he needs to do is let people know that if you're really concerned about national defense, then you better be concerned about the economy, because we are headed off an economic cliff. We're going to have a major financial collapse in this country. And when that happens, our defense is going to go down with it. We're not going to have the capability to maintain our defenses if we're bankrupt. And that's where we're headed. And Ron Paul's the only candidate that understands this and can help do something to prevent us from that will really leave us vulnerable. If you're worried about America's enemies and what they might do to us, they're going to be able to do a lot more harm if we're flat broke. If there's energy shortages, if there is rioting and looting going on because the economy has collapsed, the currency has collapsed, and price, that is an environment where we're vulnerable to terrorism or to a threat. So if we really care about national defense, we got to get Ron Paul. But he has to bring that message out that a vote for Ron Paul doesn't mean that nuclear bombs are going to start exploding in America's cities. But that is kind of the idea that's out there, kind of like when Barry Goldwater ran for president in 1964, and you had that famous ad from Lyndon Johnson that showed once with a little girl and a daisy and a nuclear bomb. They got everybody convinced that if you voted for Barry Goldwater, it was going to be nuclear war. And so it's the same kind of perception that's out there against Ron Paul. And the amazing thing is that conservatives should be for shrinking government, including national defense. It really is kind of hypocritical for other Republican candidates to talk about cutting government and wanting small government, yet not wanting to cut the military-industrial complex. It seems that they distrust government every place but the military. Well, I mean, military spending is no different. I mean, if you don't like the post office and you don't like Amtrak, who do you think is running the military? It's the same people. And he's got to stress more that if Ron Paul is such a threat to our national defenses, Why are his biggest donors the Air Force, the Navy, the Marines, the Army? Why is he getting twice as much in contributions from the military than all of his components combined? Obviously, he must have a credible defense. And these guys are voting for their commander-in-chief. They wouldn't want somebody to be their commander if they didn't believe that he was going to defend this nation. So that's what Ron Paul really has to do. And if he can come out credibly and clarify his defense stance, I think he could get a lot of who are I love Ron Paul, but, right, I love his economic policy, but we got to get those guys in the fold. And I think it's a major victory for Ron Paul that people are accepting his economic policy, because 4 years ago, nobody would have accepted it in the mainstream. He wants to do is now somehow accept it. He's talking about the gold standard and people like it. So that, this is, he's accomplished a lot. He just needs one more key hurdle to overcome to get more of these mainstream voters and to get them to see that there really is an alternative to Newt Gingrich and Mitt Romney, because there's a lot of reasons not to like Newt Gingrich. There's a lot of reasons not to like Mitt Romney. So there's anti-Romney voters and there's anti-Gingrich voters. We got to make sure they become pro-Paul voters.
Well, I got to take advantage while we have one of the economic gurus of our time, Peter, online here, and I got to ask you, an article I think I saw on Zero Hedge this week. I'm going to ask because you predicted basically the credit collapse and the housing collapse. It came well before it happened, and it was clear that you did. What are your thoughts on India and some of the Southeast Asia countries starting to exchange outside of the American dollars, the world reserve currency, and the impact that could have towards the potential collapse that you've just suggested?
Yeah, well, first of all, Ron Paul foresaw these events as well as the greater economic catastrophe that lies in our immediate future. But you're right, these Asian economies that have been bearing the lion's share of the burden of propping up the American economy. Our economy, our standard of living is based on the willingness of the rest of the world to support us by loaning us the money to buy the products that they produce. But without that foreign support, this phony consumer-based borrow and spend, bubble economy is going to implode. And yes, you're seeing the signs of that right now around the world. I think the only thing really standing between us and a complete collapse is that for some people, the problems in Europe seem to be looming larger than the problems in America. I think they've got it wrong. I think as sick as Europe is, we're sicker. And I think at some point there is going to be some kind of temporary solution European problem. It's not going to work long term, but it will work just long enough to focus the attention back on the United States where it belongs. Meanwhile, so far in 2012, the U.S. bond market is off to its worst start in many, many years. Rates are starting to pick up. We'll see if this trend continues. But higher interest rates are the Achilles heel on this phony economy. Yeah. But, unfortunately, we're never going to have a viable economic recovery until interest rates go up. Interest rates are too low. That is the big problem. They have to go up, but it's impossible for rates to go up without the economy imploding in its current form, because the government is going to be broke, the banks are going to fail, real estate's going to fall again, and we're going to have to unwind all these malinvestments. We have to reallocate land, labor, and capital in a more productive, efficient manner. But the government doesn't want that. The politicians don't want that. So they're delaying the inevitable with these phony stimuluses. And, Ron Paul talks about this stuff. He's the only candidate that does. And, it's got to hit the fan. And it's important to get some does, because believe me, if we do if we repeat the mistakes again, we keep doing the same thing. Every time government meddling creates a problem, government solutions make it worse. Well, if we do that one more time, that's it. We'll destroy the currency. It'll have no value whatsoever, and that's when you have a real economic upheaval, when you destroy the currency and wipe out the wealth of generations of Americans.
Well, what kind of fascinates me and shocks me is that not too long ago in our history, when Volcker underneath Carter's administration ramped up the interest rates, really ultimately doing the right thing if you're going to have a central bank, which none of us here would be a proponent of. But it amazes me that we've done just the opposite post-Volcker under the Federal Reserve policy, which has been to continually perpetuate the inflation and the the signals in the economy, the malinvestments from artificially low lending rates, and it just surprises me that we can. It baffles me, and I'm curious as to why you think.
Yeah, you know, it's ironic too.
Go ahead, Peter, please.
I said it's. We want to, you know, talks about reining in the Federal Reserve. You'll have, you know, opponents saying, well, we have to preserve the independence of the Fed. We don't want the Fed to be politicized. Well, it's already politicized, and it's not independent at all. That's the problem. The Federal Reserve acts in concert with the government. It's an agent of the government. It basically enables the government to spend beyond its means. We need a real independent Federal Reserve. We don't have that right now. And so we need to strip the Fed of its power and make it truly independent. And then eventually maybe we can get rid of it completely. But the idea is if you're really going to have an independent central bank, it can't be independent in name only. It has to be independent in practice. And it has to rein in government. It can't cooperate with the government. It can't, you know, it can't be enabling the government. And you can't have a Federal Reserve chairman who's popular. He's got to be willing to take the punch bowl away. That was the problem with Greenspan and now Bernanke. They want to be liked. They want the politicians to like them. They want the people to like them. You know, everybody hated Paul Volcker, but he did a good job. Yeah. And that's how you know you're a central banker, if the people don't like you. And especially Wall Street. If Wall Street likes you, you know you're doing a bad job because all you're doing is feeding the speculative frenzy that's bleeding the nation dry.
So what do we do to get you to be the Fed chairman? Peter, you close it tomorrow.
I don't know. I mean, maybe we can elect Ron Paul as president, and I don't know that I would be Fed chairman under that scenario. But I could bet that somebody better than Ben Bernanke would be Fed chairman if Ron Paul were president. Although interestingly enough, I did get Steve Forbes. If you listen to the interview, he wouldn't endorse him for president, but he did say he wanted him to be the chairman of the Federal Reserve. That's a pretty good vote of confidence on Ron Paul on the economy and money from Steve Forbes, who, you know, he is a mainstream guy and he does have a lot of influence in the Republican Party.
Do you think at a brokered convention there's anything structurally that could happen? For example, if Ron Paul is really that strong with a delegate count relative to one of the other candidates, that he could do to really, really affect monetary policy and federal banking policy at that convention, or is there nothing structurally there that you see?
What would happen to Ron Paul, as I said earlier, if he comes...
Yeah, go ahead, Peter, please.
Well, we're not going to... Look, they're not going to set monetary policy at the convention.
Of course.
No, but the key for Ron Paul, having influence on the party platform and having influence on who the ultimate nominee is, if he has enough delegates to sway the outcome. Because if let's assume, for example, that nobody has enough delegates to claim a majority, but that let's say Newt Gingrich and Mitt Romney have big more delegates than Ron Paul, but neither one of them has enough to win. But Ron Paul's delegates basically, whoever they go to is going to win, then Ron Paul really gets to pick the nominee to the extent that his delegates are going to vote for who Ron Paul would endorse. And that really elevates him within that party. It shows the party how much power he has, how much power his message has, how much power his supporters have. It can influence the platform that they write. He certainly will give Ron Paul a prominent speaking position at the Republican convention. And again, it could, help determine who the vice presidential nomination is, who is very important. Even if the Republicans end up losing to Barack Obama, who, if you get that vice presidential nominee, could be a very strong contender to be the standard bearer in 2016 and lead the Republican ticket back to victory if we end up failing in 2012. And if we win in 2012, then great. That person is probably even in a better position to ultimately one day be president. If that person happens to be Rand, that would be a very good outcome.
Lisa? Yeah.
Well, I just had a question about the Fed dual mandate discussion. It seems like every candidate now is kind of coming around to talking about maybe they shouldn't have the dual mandate. They shouldn't be in charge of inflation, keeping inflation down and unemployment down. Is that right? I think I got that right. Do you think that this is a discussion that's really going to, if the dual mandate was changed to a single mandate, would that really affect that much in our economy?
Well, given the current thinking at the Fed, I would say no. But the dual mandate is based on a flawed theory called the Phillips curve, which says that, as inflation goes up, unemployment comes down and vice versa. And it's just not true. Ideally, the way the Fed keeps unemployment down is to have sound money and low inflation. But the real reasons that we have so much unemployment is that interest rates have been artificially too low, and that has helped undermine our economy. But the more important reasons have to do with government regulations and taxes and subsidies that destroy jobs and prevent jobs from being created. And the Fed can't do anything about that. And if there's a lot of unemployment, and because there's a lot of unemployment, the Fed just creates inflation because somehow it thinks that inflation is going to solve that problem. It just makes it worse. It just means that the people who are unemployed now have to pay a lot more money for food. They have to pay a lot more money for not who are unemployed, but the people who have jobs. Their salaries don't buy as much because the Fed is creating inflation on this phony belief that that's how you bring down unemployment, when it's not. So we should get rid of the dual mandate. It should just be a mandate for price stability, although I don't want stable prices. I want to go back to falling prices, which is what we had before the Fed. The country thrived on falling prices, and we all know that falling prices are a good thing in computers and television sets and all the places where the free market is functioning and prices are falling. It'd be great if we had falling prices everywhere in the economy, in education, in healthcare, in food, in energy. If prices were going down for everything, everybody would benefit, particularly the poor and the middle class, who would benefit the most. So that's what we really need, not this crazy idea that the government has to stop prices from falling, as if that's somehow a bad thing.
Please. Oh, okay. We just had this is interesting. We just had Newt Gingrich call for a knockout money bomb. We're talking about monetary policy right now. Newt Gingrich in this, the interesting thing is that these candidates, the Republican candidates, have all had this trajectory of rising and then falling as quick as they rose. The mainstream media was suggesting, it was Michelle Bachmann, then it was Rick Perry, then it was Herman Cain, and then and on, and Santorum and Gingrich. And he seems to be getting a little bit of a second wind, but as we were talking about earlier, there's 500 delegates that they can't have because they're not on the balanced state, both him and Santorum. When you're out traveling around the country, what are you seeing on the ground relative to the people that you're talking to? I know that you were really active during the Wall Street protests. You were doing some really great stuff and very brave to go out saying you're the 1%, talk to me, and really show people true economic philosophy and how that their ideas really weren't rooted in that. What are you seeing around the country as you're going around relative to what people are thinking? Is it a gross change from 2008 back in that time? What are you seeing?
Well, I don't know. I'm not traveling too much, and when I travel, I usually, get a skewed sense. If I give a speech and an auditorium full of my people in my database show up to hear me talk, obviously they're disproportionately going to be Ron Paul supporters. So, I'm not really going around the country taking surveys, but I could see the polls that are coming out. I could see how much support Ron Paul is getting this year versus 2008, which is, look at how much more support. Mitt Romney has lost support in some of these primaries from where he was in 2008. Despite the fact that he's had all this money and he's got all the big names behind him, and he's been running for president for 5 years, he's lost support. And Ron Paul has gained a lot of support over the last 4 or 5 years. So it's only going to grow. And again, if you look at the demographics, look at the young people who are behind Ron. 4 years from now, they're still going to be for Ron Paul as they get older, but now a whole new crop of younger people who are now too young to vote, they're going to be 18, 19, 20. You're going to get a lot more Ron Paul supporters there. So this is a young movement, which means the movement's going to grow. And that's what you need. If you can capture the young people, if you can capture the youth, that's a movement that's got legs. And I think it's a great victory that we have young people that normally would be swinging to the left. I mean, normally when you're young and you don't know very much, you have very little experience in the real world, you gravitate to socialism, you gravitate to Democrats because it sounds good. Actually, work in taxes and run a business, that you discover how much damage government does and how everything backfires and all the good intentions just pave these roads to hell. So normally you have to be a little older, a little bit more experienced before you're smart enough to become a conservative or a libertarian. But the fact that Ron Paul is helping to educate people, and maybe the internet, and I'm probably doing a little part too, that we're getting the young people earlier on. I mean, that's a very, very positive sign that there's hope on the horizon for the country.
And I just wanted to mention one thing that I don't think we talk about often enough is the fact that between 2008 and this year, Ron Paul's pulling in some, I like to say establishment just because it throws people off, but establishment, endorsements, which it was unheard of 4 years ago. He's pulling in, people in positions of a lot of respect.
Jim DeMint didn't outright, but a very strong...
Very close to endorsing. I mean, that right there, it speaks volumes. What do you think about that?
The good thing is, Ron Paul isn't changing to meet that establishment. Yeah. The establishment is changing to meet him.
That's right.
So he's just been a consistent voice throughout, and he was way out on the fringe, and now he's more mainstream.
So are you, Peter, though. You were that guy too, Peter. And you were right. I will not bet you a penny on anything I will lose.
Peter, it seems like the American people have become very disenchanted with Washington. Congress is, it's kind of a big position. So we already have that element that's involved, where American people think Congress can't do anything anymore because they can't agree on anything. And then now we have a position where we have Ron Paul, who's got a pretty sound but very big plan. What's your take on, Washington migrating over to Ron Paul's plan and getting things done? Part of me, I don't know if it's because Obama, it's his platform and he's trying to do politics that's keeping Congress from making any kind of movement. But what's your take on Ron Paul when our constituents, they want to know, can Ron Paul get this done when he goes, through Congress, kill some of these departments?
You mean if he was president?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Well, absolutely. If Ron Paul's president, he can absolutely get a lot of it done, because remember, you've got that veto pen. So all he needs is a small group of free market Republicans to uphold his vetoes, and government is going to shrink dramatically. Because if they can't get these, deficit through Congress, if he doesn't sign on to an killing, government's going to have to shrink dramatically. So absolutely, if he becomes president, you're going to see huge reductions in government spending, in the size of government. There's not going to be any way that they're going to get these big budgets over his veto unless they get 2/3 of both the House and the Senate to override that veto.
We were talking.
If Ron Paul becomes president, he's not going to do it in a vacuum. You're going to get some free market people on those coattails winning some of these House seats. So, yeah, it's huge if he becomes president.
Well, we were talking about that early, Peter, and that's an excellent point before you came on, and that one of the few powers delegated to the executive branch, which is never talked about, is the power of the veto, and how that really could shape the policy of America. It forces the Congress to go back and justify their budgets to their constituents in a time when the vast number of Americans don't want these inflated budgets.
Yeah, there are a lot of people campaign for a balanced budget amendment. If Ron Paul is president, we don't need a balanced budget amendment. If he wanted to, he can balance it his first year. Now, he's not even calling that. He's just saying he wants to cut $1 trillion in year one. That isn't even enough to. That's how big the deficit is. Right. But if he wanted to balance it in his first year, he could do it with that veto pen. Because if we can't raise the debt ceiling, we can't spend money we don't have. And so Congress is going to be forced to cut. And then the question is, what do we cut? And that's a discussion that I would love to see happen in Congress, is having the congressmen all voting on what to cut and prioritizing the spending.
Yeah. Now, what would you suggest? And I mean, this is obviously, you know, economics and investments as good as anybody, and better. No, I take that back. Better than 99% of the people out there saying anything. What would you say to the viewers here that are watching as a person that's smart as you are, and how they manage themselves in this unsure environment of these large deficits? Do you have any, you know, off the cuff things you could recommend or discuss?
Well, I mean, nothing's off the cuff. I mean, that's what I do for a living. I've been preparing for a collapse of the dollar for many, many years, as has Congressman Paul. I mean, unfortunately, I see it coming. I don't really see anything to stop it. In fact, I don't think Congress is going to do the right thing until there's a crisis. And so as long as we can borrow money and spend it, that's exactly what we're going to do. And eventually, you know, we're going to go over the edge of that cliff, and it's going to be the crisis that is going to cause us potentially to do the right thing, although it's going to be a lot more difficult and a lot more painful because we waited so long. But, you know, in the meantime, yeah, I mean, you know, the tax that people have to fear is inflation. The way the government's going to confiscate your wealth is the dollar and taking the purchasing power from your savings, your investments, your wages. And so what Americans need to do is, you know, protect themselves by owning gold, owning silver, having foreign assets, whether it's foreign stocks or foreign bonds or other ways to get out of the U.S. currency. Because if you don't have the U.S. currency, then you're not going to, you know, be subject to that inflation tax. But that is how the U.S. government is going to pay, or, you know, I put pay in quotes. We're not getting all this government for free. We're going to have to pay for it somehow. And if they're not going to raise our taxes, then it's going to be through inflation. And that's how people are going to suffer. Prices are going to go up, and the difference between what we used to pay and what we're going to pay is the taxes, is the cost of government. You know, the Democrats would like us to believe that, oh no, we can have all this government and we can make the rich pay for it. You know, there's not enough rich people, and even they don't have enough money. And if you try to raise their taxes, you know, it's just going to backfire because they're just not going to earn as much, which means they're not going to produce as much, they're not going to hire as many people, and the government is actually going to end up collecting less in taxes if they try to significantly raise taxes on the people who are already paying the lion's share of the taxes. So, you know, unless they're willing to have huge tax increases on the middle class, we need massive cuts in government spending, and absent that, it's just going to be runaway inflation.
You know, you're talking about the economy right now, and we keep seeing in all the polling in every state here in the primaries and caucuses that jobs and the economy are is the number one issue. So, you know, earlier you were talking about foreign policy and how within the Republican Party we need to, you know, speak to Ron Paul's foreign policy a little bit more clearly and remind people that, you know, he is for a strong national defense. But among independents, you know, we have a real opportunity to outreach on the economic issues. That's what they're most concerned about. That's far and away what this election is about. So I think you know, we're all activists here trying to get people to the polls. I think one thing we need to remember is sometimes we can you know, we get a little skittish about speaking with the Republicans on foreign policy, but we need to remember that we need to be bringing independence in on the economic issues.
Well, the foreign policy, I just think that's where Ron Paul unfortunately loses a lot of Republican support, is on the foreign policy. So I think he has to do a better job of explaining how America is safer, how America is stronger, based on the reforms that he wants to make in the way we conduct our foreign policy and the money that we spend in the name of national defense that has nothing to do with making our nation stronger. It actually contributes to making our nation weaker by unnecessarily running up our deficits and making us more vulnerable. So that is important. I think when it comes to economics, I would like to see him elaborate a little bit more about how bad things are about to get, about the real crisis, and, you know, play up his track record as having been the only candidate back in 2008 to have warned of the financial crisis. He was sounding the alarm when he ran for president when Mitt Romney ran for president in 2008, he thought everything was great. He thought George Bush had done a good job. He thought the U.S. economy was in good shape. Ron Paul was warning of the impending collapse. He was warning about the housing bubble. He was warning about the banks. So Ron Paul got it right back then. Mitt Romney got it wrong. And he needs to remind people of that and let people know how bad it's going to be unless we do. Ron Paul's the only guy running that knows what the right thing is.
Yeah. Peter, you had mentioned when you were talking about economics and what, maybe some of the listeners or what the constituents can do to, maybe protect their assets. One of the components that you said is some interest in foreign stocks. It seems like it would not be beneficial for anybody to get involved in any foreign market in Europe or Greece. Is there any foreign nations or what have you that you favor, that you think that it would be good for some people to consider, for economic protections?
Yeah, I mean, we've underweighted the Eurozone, but we do have some investments in countries in Europe that are not part of the Euro, and so we own some of them. But we overweight the Asian economies and the natural resource sector. So we've got a lot of money there as a firm, and we advise our clients. Yeah, but there are a lot of countries you can invest in, currencies, companies, commodities that you can own so that you can get out of the dollar. I mean, that is when it comes to the fiat currencies, there are no currencies anymore that are backed by gold. They're all fiat. So you're, choosing the lesser of the evils. But there are governments out there that aren't making as many mistakes as our government, or the mistakes are not as grand as the ones that we're making. So you pick the currencies where the governments are screwing up the least. But also, I think you try to buy real things. You buy real assets and companies that are going to be able to retain their value, that are delivering earnings growth and paying good dividends to their shareholders. And so there are investments that you can make. And as I said earlier, gold and silver are things that you can own as a store of value. And gold's been going up now for 10, 11 years in a row. I think that trend is going to continue because the monetary policies and the fiscal policies that have driven that bull market are just, getting worse. We're making the same mistakes, only bigger. So I think gold and silver keep rising.
Well, I think as a testimony to the confidence and the work that you're doing and the suggestions you're making, I have a number of people here tweeting in asking you for your football picks. I think they think that you can tell the future, and I think your track record pretty much shows that. So if you can tell us who to pick.
It's probably going to be New England. I mean, I don't think you have to. But I'm also, I'm also going to be pulling for the Giants because I'd like to see
a little hometown,
New England Super Bowl. Although I used to be a bit of a fan of the 49ers. I went to school in Berkeley, and so while I was there, I used to root for San Francisco. But here I'm in Connecticut, and New York is kind of like a home team. Although I'm right between. There's a lot of people in Connecticut who are New England fans because they play up in Boston. So for this area, for Connecticut, to have a New York, Boston Super Bowl would probably be a pretty good thing. So that's, what I'd like to see. And I probably would root for the upset. I'd probably be rooting for the Giants to beat the Patriots.
Well, so as our viewers can see, they ask and we deliver. That's great, Peter. I mean, we're answering their tweets. There was someone here offering to buy you dinner as well, but I think it's going to be a little difficult online to do that.
All right, but anyway, I got to run. I'm actually feeling a little under the weather this evening, so I'm kind of losing my voice a bit too. So.
Well, hey, we can't thank you enough for coming on.
I was watching your feed a little bit, and I'll just so the reason that the networks call this so early, right? They don't have to wait for the polls to come in. They call the race based on their own exit polling. So basically, the networks know who won the thing before the polls close. But they've got a deal that they're not going to announce the winner until after the polls close. But they are doing exit polling. They have pollsters that are talking to voters as they come out of the voting booths, and they're asking them who they voted for and why. And so they know who's going to win because the polling is scientific. And they know exactly who the winner is. They don't have to wait for the votes to come in or be counted. The exit polls tell the story. And so that's how they knew right off the bat who came in first, second, third, and fourth, even before you saw 1% of the precincts reporting, because they had all the results from all the exit polling that they had been doing all day long. And statistically, they pretty much can tell what's going to happen.
Well, thanks for correcting us that. I think it seems that the only thing that you're consistent is being right, and we love it. Peter, thank you for sharing time. Get well, feel better soon. We really appreciate your time, and our viewers
Thanks for having me on. Thanks for what you're doing. It's important that you guys get the word out there and provide some alternative sources to the mainstream media. And so I'm glad that you guys are doing what you're doing, and good luck with your endeavors in the future.
Thank you, Peter. We look forward to seeing you soon, so take care.
Bye-bye.
Gary Franchi.
All right, that was Peter Schiff calling in from his from the Peter Schiff compound, and looks like so far we got 88.2% reporting in the South Carolina primary, and Gingrich is still in the lead. Romney is second place, Santorum is third. Paul at fourth place, 13.4%, and that's exactly the number we got in our independent poll conducted by the Tele Research Corporation out of Indiana. So I'm not that surprised, and I'm happy that he did come in fourth. But we understand that there is a strategy employed here by the campaign to go for the delegates. As our panel noted, I was just keeping track of some of the web traffic, and I noticed that Newt Gingrich has already put out an email calling for the knockout money bomb. I thought that was hilarious. Why? Because Newt Gingrich is about to get knocked out, and he doesn't have enough money to sustain his campaign. From what I understand, they're relying on the super PACs to do their heavy lifting, because Newt Gingrich just can't raise the money himself, so he's got to rely on his outside sources. And much like we are the super PAC for Ron Paul, we need your support, we need your contributions. And I want you to take a look at something real quick. If you could hand me the new Ron Paul action figure here. Here is the first ever Ron Paul action figure. You're seeing it here, ronpaulactionfigures.com. The website just went live tonight, and you can get your very own. There's 2 models currently. We don't have the other model out yet right now, but this is the Commander-in-Chief Paul, and he actually talks too. He says, "I'm Ron Paul, I'm the champion of the Constitution." For I think it's $97. You can own one of these, and your the proceeds go to support efforts to elect Ron Paul. So get on over to that website, ronpaulactionfigures.com, and get your very own. Now you can take action with Ron Paul. He even comes specially equipped with his own U.S. Constitution. It's micro-sized, but it still packs a punch. We're waiting right now. I'm like waving him around like he's just like a pointer. No, we're waiting now for Dan Johnson and Aaron Jones, who are standing by in South Carolina. Looks like we're going to be giving them a call. We've gave them the heads up. They're bringing some people in, and are we connecting with them? Okay, it looks like we have them on the line. Let's see.
I can see them.
We got them. Okay, there they are. So, Aaron, talk to us. Who are you with? Okay. All right, well, they will be with us shortly. Skype is a finicky little technology, and you never really know what you're going to get. But Peter Schiff, that was quite an interview.
No, that was excellent. To have both Tom Woods and Peter Schiff in one night, it's an amazing hit. And for those that are involved in the liberty movement, to understand how important they are in the books. And for those that have been watching this broadcast or the webcast and don't follow Tom Woods or Peter Schiff, or any of you that don't, we couldn't say that they come with higher recommendations. Nullification, Crash Proof 2.0, Meltdown, excellent works. Rollback, just tremendous works from these people. And we would highly recommend it. Looks like we're online with our group yet to ask some questions. Can you guys hear us?
Yeah,
I can hear you.
Yeah, we can. We lost the connection there.
Yeah, Skype, we understand. So tell us what's going on over there.
Well, the rally's pretty much wrapped up now. Most of the people have left. Paul came and gave a great speech, and everyone was very pumped about that. So right now, pretty much everything's winding down. They got a band playing, and so it was very good while Paul was up there speaking.
It was pretty good. Everyone felt pretty energized and so forth.
Yeah, very, very energized. probably the best point to take back from what Paul was saying was that less than 2% of the total delegates to the Republican National Convention have been chosen. So there's still a long, long way to go, despite what the media says.
Right, and Peter Schiff was just on, and we were discussing that you know, a lot of these, for example, as Gingrich goes forward, he doesn't have a lot of budget to really continue on. There's 500 delegates that they can't get because they're not even on the ballot, and so it's a long haul. This is a marathon run to get the nomination. It's not the first 3 states dictating the outcome of this result.
Absolutely.
Chance to run to Carol Paul earlier today. How'd that go?
Take a look at a video we had a chance to make up here and down here. We got a chance to interview Carol Paul, and she talked about the experience of seeing the ad, The Compassion of Dr. Ron Paul, and she talked about the fact that, you know, there are a lot of stories like this, and this just isn't the kind of thing he brags about. It's really great to be a part of an organization that really brings that to light, and I think people are sharing the message. So I hope everybody had a chance to see that interview with Carol Paul. You can see it up at the Revolution PAC YouTube page.
Yeah, we did in fact play that earlier today along with the full version of The Compassion of Dr. Paul. That video, the full version, has now received well over 500,000 views. Just completely went viral. And that's just part and parcel for the Ron Paul message. As you guys know out there, you're feeling it firsthand, that it's an infectious message. When people see the compassion, when they see the message of liberty, they continue to spread it like a virus, but it's a good thing.
Yeah, absolutely. The veterans I talk to, my heart really breaks for them, and it goes out to them. Really inspires me to work all the more. There's another video that just went up today of a veteran, Iraqi war veteran, has seen some of his friends die in Iraq, and he really laid his heart out on the line and gave us a great interview, and I hope people see that too. It's an interview. I think it says Iraqi veteran says he will vote for Ron Paul.
Well, we'll definitely see if we can get that up on the stream a little bit later. I know we've been downloading a lot of stuff today, and so far, you guys, just so you know, we've had over 3,200 connections to the live stream tonight. So I'd say that's a pretty strong showing, and this is the first of many broadcasts we hope to bring to the American people. You know, giving them an alternative view of the election, a Paul-centric view, if you will. You know, because we're biased, and we're not going to lie about it here, because you know, we got the signs everywhere. Just because, you know, these guys out there at Fox News, they have different corporate interests that they're pandering to. They don't. They're subversively biased. So what's next for you guys out there in the out there on the ground?
Well, really quick, I just want to say about the bias in the media. Very interesting to show that MSNBC actually had the delegate numbers for Paul and Santorum switched earlier when we were watching it. So that was really interesting to see. But what's up for us next right now? We got some great interviews here, and we've got a few more people lined up down in Columbia, South Carolina. So we're gonna work hard to get those videos uploaded so that everyone can see them, and then we're gonna go home tomorrow.
Yeah, I got a cool announcement. Is I have an interview coming up potentially with Tony Pashos of the Cleveland Browns. He had a chance to see some of RevPAC's ads, and we'll see if that comes about next Thursday down in Jacksonville. Hopefully that'll happen.
All right, guys. Well, you guys keep up the great work out there. Have a safe travel. I know it's getting late on your end. You guys are on the Eastern time zone, so break it down and have a great night, and we'll see you guys when you come back.
Thanks a lot.
All right, great. Thanks a lot. Have a great night, guys.
Thank you. Aaron Jones and Dan Johnson, the Revolution PAC Ground Forces, great fellas, tireless out there. I mean, I went and met with them in New Hampshire, and those guys, they were crammed in their hotel room. They had laptops fired up. I mean, it was just like, it was like a war room, and it was really something else to see. And I'm happy to see that we have people out there who are feeding us the information from the ground. This is just the beginning.
Oh, absolutely. And something that I think is really, Lisa hit on this earlier. When we take a look at where we were in 2008 to today, we've come so far. There wasn't the Revolution PAC. The ads that have come out of this organization were unanimously voted as some of the best campaign ads ever. You know, they've been tremendous and had a huge impact. And in 2008, it was a lonely place to be a Ron Paul supporter. Yeah. There wasn't something like this where we could voice our opinions on a liberty-centric way that anyone would see, and we've come a long ways. And I think part of the power of the movement, for example, my friend Paul over here, starting a business around these properties and ideas like I've tried to do, and the future of our movement is one of ideas, but it's also one of community. But it's not the community in the traditional, you know, Hillary Rodham Clinton sense of community. It's community of individuals doing our things and helping each other voluntarily to build up our influence, to build up our businesses and our structure and our organization, to get so that we can change the mind and return America to the ideals that it was. And I think that's something that we shouldn't gloss over when we were talking about the delegate process earlier. Getting engaged in that process to make sure they have
and some of the tools that Revolution PAC is providing. You know, these guys are they're in all the early primary states and all the early caucus states, interviewing real people on the ground. Why are you supporting Ron Paul? You know, those videos that they're putting together, they're posting up on Revolution PAC website, and to me, like you were mentioning, those are great things to share with your friends. You know, they're interviewing different, you know, from a Christian perspective, why are you supporting Ron Paul? From a veteran's perspective. So they're really targeting in on some demographics that we're going to want to reach out to, and those videos are great, just great to share with anybody in your circle, you know, who may.
Even if you figure the fiscal component of the campaign, back in 2008, I mean, although he did generate a lot of money, I mean, the money bombs that he's been doing this time around.
13 million last quarter, I think.
Every single month, there's a $1 million, $2 million money bomb that's been going on. Not to mention, you have grassroots, you know, now in 2012, where you didn't have it so much in 2008. You figure in Illinois, most of the signatures were based on volunteer. So you got to remember, not only is Ron Paul generating a lot of funds for his race, he has a lot of grassroots out there that's doing most of the work for free. They're really spreading.
Like
so
our district, we were a voluntary grassroots effort that collected our signatures in our own organization.
It's so interesting to contrast this with the Tea Party movement that was originally focused on so much and called the grassroots movement, but it really lacked an intellectual cohesiveness and foundation to continue. And what's so interesting about this movement is that it has brought about so many people becoming interested in liberty and Austrian economics, and there's a real solid foundation behind the movement that really holds it together, whereas the Tea Party movement didn't really have that foundation. It was very much divided. It was really unclear as to what their purpose was, other than Rick Santelli's rant. I don't know if they really had anything else that really kept them together. They were angry, but they didn't know what it was, and it was almost like the other side of the coin of the Occupy Wall Street movement, a movement with a lot of anger, but they didn't really know what direction to go. But with the Ron Paul movement, it's very clear as to what direction everybody wants to go in, and that's why I think it'll last indefinitely.
Well, and a perfect example of the Revolution PAC that brought this today. I mean, really, on a shoestring or no budget, so we could get that word out. It's important to support them and donate to them as well, revolutionpac.com, and get that voice out. We're here voluntarily. We're just here trying to get the word out in a way that we think is a lot more. It shows a perspective that we're not going to get from Fox News. We're not going to get it from CNN. We're not going to get it from MSNBC. As a matter of fact, we're lucky if we get a word in or any of the print media. I mean, it's just, and so definitely, if you can, support Ron Paul's organization, other Liberty candidates, Revolution PAC, that brought some of the best.
And you figure with Revolution PAC, they're the ones that brought about that compassion video, which was a great response to the newsletters. Maybe the Ron Paul campaign didn't get on board. So having Revolution PAC, Rep PAC involved in donating to Rep PAC is just as important, because there's things that the campaign does, there's things grassroots that Rep PAC does that has a monumental effect on this campaign.
The Revolution PAC is even more quick to respond than the campaign, and arguably more effective. Even Ron Paul...
They can focus on certain things.
Absolutely.
Of the campaign.
Even Ron Paul's deviations from libertarianism, Ron Paul is called out really more by his own supporters. And not that they want to withdraw their support from Dr. Paul, but yet it's Ron Paul's supporters that are keeping him honest. And I think that's what leads us in our intellectual journey to learn more, is that when we first learn about Dr. Paul's ideas, it makes us want to learn more. And I
Right.
don't think that's like any other candidate.
And you know,
I
please do.
Sorry, I want to
Please.
pick up on something Paul said earlier about the Tea Party. Personally, I've tried. I think we've all tried to interact. You know, we've been involved with tea parties. We've spoken at tea parties. So we're tea partiers, I guess. You know,
Part of the fraction.
Right. One thing I do notice about the Tea Party is that they're very upset about the Federal Reserve. That's an issue around which they're upset. But the interesting thing about it is they don't realize that Ron Paul was the one who brought that whole issue into the forefront. They don't realize it. So I think there's a real opportunity to educate the Tea Party, the kind of the mainstream Tea Party, about how that came about. Because I think they hear sound bites, you know, from Fox News, or they did. Now we don't hear it as much anymore. But you know, they were very upset about that issue.
Yeah.
And Ron Paul is the one, of course, we know, that uncovered the $16 trillion in previously undisclosed bailouts to foreign and domestic, corporations and
Just
and
a
government.
partial audit.
So,
just a
right,
partial
just a
audit.
partial audit.
Right.
So when people say, I just want to say one more thing. When people say, "What has Ron Paul done?" He's been in Congress for 30 years. What has he done? He's only had one bill passed. To me, I think that's an area that we can stress to people. I don't see anyone else uncovering $16 trillion in bailouts to secret bailouts, and we need to remember to remind people that he's the one who instigated that.
Yeah, and really, if you look at a lot of the bills that Ron Paul proposed, it just goes to show how much Congress and the Senate are just the distance between they are with the individual, the people, the constituents that they're supposed to represent. He had proposed a bill when Obama had taken about $500 million out of Social Security to use it for the wars. After that, in response, Ron Paul had proposed a bill, to essentially say that no matter what money that was put into that is only used for that purpose. That didn't get passed. Why in the world would Congress not pass something like that? It just, you figure in other different areas, we're individuals that make money with their tips. He's proposed that. That didn't go through. So it really is not so much that Ron Paul can't do it. The reality of it is it just goes to show us how much Congress and the Senate are far away. Their objectives are much further away from the American people than they claim they are.
Right.
And to actually, I'm taking a look at some of the tweets here, and people are asking questions, and I think is really important about the delegate process and so forth, that in the short term we're like talking through Super Tuesday, what could they do? And there's a question here from Edward Fate. He said, can you go into detail about the 500 delegates that the other candidates can't get? It's not that they can't get them. The reason that Newt Gingrich and Santorum can't get the delegates is they're not on the ballot in the state. And so the way the delegate process works is it's a lot like the Electoral College. People are on the ballot that you vote for that then go to the major primary down in Florida then to elect their candidate. Which is in August,
yeah.
right?
So
down in Florida.
Yeah, months and
Tampa.
months from now. Yeah.
Right. And so they didn't get enough signatures. Each state sets its own laws as to how delegates are voted in for certain candidates. They didn't meet that criteria. For example, Newt Gingrich is not on the ballot in Virginia. Nobody is except for Ron Paul and Mitt Romney. And so without the delegates, there can be no vote cast for those guys to go down to the primary convention in Tampa in August and cast a ballot for those guys, and that's 500. There has to be 1,404.
1,144?
Yeah, thank you. I've been talking for a while now. That's right.
And that's even another component that the Ron Paul supporters have to really understand. In addition to them spreading the message of voting for Ron Paul, in some of the states, say for instance like Illinois, that has this delegate process, they're all slated. It's almost just as important for them to vote for the delegates as it is for Ron Paul. Yeah. Yes. And oftentimes, how it's set up on the ballot is they'll have the name of the candidate, say for instance myself, Aaron Gallagly, and then in parentheses next to it, Paul.
Right.
For Mitt Romney's, they'll do the same. But oftentimes people don't really understand the election process that, anytime that you tell someone to vote for Ron Paul, that needs to be followed up with you have to vote for their delegates. It's just as important. So I think oftentimes Ron Paul supporters don't understand that, but it's a message that needs to get out to everybody.
It's not only Ron Paul supporters. Apparently the Associated Press, right after the Iowa caucus, had reported that Ron Paul didn't get any delegates at all, and I think CNN reported he got 6, or it might have been the other way around. But in reality, they're not to be assigned until I believe March 10th.
Right.
So amazingly, I never thought the Associated Press and CNN. Now at least one of them had to be wrong if they're reporting different numbers.
If you look at the reporting, none of them are consistent because they're all projected. They're all projected.
But that didn't give us that impression.
Right.
I said, this is how many delegates. It didn't say anything about projection.
Right.
Does the whole mainstream media misunderstand this process because it works so differently than it has in the past?
And it works in every state. It's a unique process. And they want to show again that there's consensus building towards certain candidates, and they're having a hard time doing that.
Well, and tonight we saw that a week ago. Newt Gingrich really wasn't on. I believe I recall the numbers a week ago for Mitt Romney was 40% in South Carolina, and that quite certainly didn't happen. And so again, the conversation became Newt surging. You know, it sounds awfully familiar. It sounded a lot like what happened with Santorum in Iowa. I mean, it sounded like Huntsman in New Hampshire, the attempt to call. You know, and that's a dialogue that we've seen in this election cycle over and over again, but I think in the past as well. We saw it there too, but truth be known, other than the Liberty candidate Ron Paul, the difference between the candidates really on policies was so low, in between whether they were Republicans or Democrats, but just within the Republican Party, that it wasn't the same. There wasn't that differentiation, and so it's kind of ironic that the only one that hasn't surged is the one that's continually increased, and why we're not hearing that, and we're trying to speak that today.
And I would also say the one candidate that is the complete opposite and the best to debate against, Barack Obama. You figure Newt Gingrich always says, "I'm better to go against Barack Obama," but if you really think of all the candidates, they all essentially, whether they supported the bailout, supported TARP, some of them are questionable on the Second Amendment. NDAA, Mitt Romney had just recently said, so if you think about it, most of those other candidates that go up against Barack Obama, I can't imagine what the debate's going to be. That he's going to say
a lot of agreement.
Well, you voted against, you voted in favor of NDAA. Well, so did you. Like you liked it too. And the bailouts, and across the board. And so, really, I think, in addition to, of course, I want to get Ron Paul as the president, but what I'd really like to see is this dialogue, this absolute contrast dialogue of philosophies. And then let the American people start to really see what works. There's absolutely nothing Barack Obama can debate Ron Paul in terms of economics. Ron Paul will just blow him out of the water, I think, in terms of that. Well, and
there have been repeated, every single study that's been done so far has shown that Ron Paul polls as well as Mitt Romney against Barack Obama.
Yes,
so
absolutely.
We're not talking about how. We need to remember that there are concrete numbers that show that Ron Paul is electable, Ron Paul is viable against Barack Obama because he can bring in the independent. We all know this, the independents and the disaffected Democrats.
Absolutely, and yes, and of course it's not the popular vote, but the Electoral College, and the only person who has any chance of winning California for perhaps the first time that I've ever remembered is. As a Republican is Ron Paul. No other Republican, of course, will win California. And Ron Paul would, like any other Republican, would certainly win Texas. You do the simple math. If somebody wins California and Texas, I don't think the popular vote matters a whole heck of a lot. And the other issue is Glenn Greenwald wrote a fantastic article about the idea of the hypocrisy of many progressive liberals and how they are forced to look at themselves in the mirror when they see the contrast between what Obama has supported and what Ron Paul has supported. And it really exposes the contradiction that many liberal Democrats have to face, that in reality Ron Paul might be more appealing to them than Barack Obama is.
Well, and it's interesting. I read that article too, and it was fascinating. But I also think a similar dialogue within the Republican Party is happening now too, relative to the military-industrial complex and our interventionism. And it's when you just look at the raw numbers that you're in over 140 countries and 900 military bases or institutions. Their foreign policy is over $1 trillion annually, but we're $15 trillion in debt, and that doesn't include the unfunded liabilities, which I hear is over $100 trillion. Give or take 20%, either way, that's a number that just can't be paid in the long run. It's very complex, and so within the conservatives, which traditionally were fiscally conservative, they have to have that same thing, and I think the liberty movement is, for them, and we've been talking about it all night, how do you get past that point? That is going to be the most difficult thing. You know, that's what the conservatives, not the conservatives, the Republican Party has based their platform on for the better part of a couple decades. And to undo that, either economically it will undo itself, or you know, or there'll be a radical change, like somebody, Ron Paul, comes in and can really make an effect and change it in a positive way to bring it from the brink.
And I think in some regards, as Peter Schiff has mentioned, you know, the weakest point, you know, amongst the GOP base, I guess you'd say, or the neoconservatives, would be the foreign policy. But if you really think about it, you know, and I blame a lot of that on mainstream media, given this linear idea of, you know, what a foreign policy should be. I mean, if you think historically, you know, when the Founding Fathers, the purpose of the Second Amendment, so that everybody can bear arms, was not only so that the people can be, you know, protect their own property and stuff, it was really and truly to have another component of having such a solid national defense, because no other country really could invade us when
you'd have to get past the civilians
everybody
before you got to the army.
You know, and what's concerning is when you have candidates like Mitt Romney that are weak on the Second Amendment, the GOP base needs to really understand, if they want a strong national defense, that is another component that Ron Paul is very strong in national defense, and he is really ultimately weak. You never hear that in the mainstream media. And then you figure, here's another component that the other candidates are weak in national defense. Our National Guard initially was instilled so that we would have a national, like, protection here for different things, you know. That has since, some of our National Guard has, you know, been put overseas. So that's another component of protection that that was initially instilled in this country that we don't have. So if we have all of these bases around the world, not that many soldiers here, it really, really puts us at risk. Then you figure some different areas, like, say, for instance, Chicago, where they start to try to ban on, you know, weapons, you know, your personal use, or, you know, owning a weapon. I think on the whole, the conservatives really need to understand the true foundation of secure national defense, and maybe through that, I think that they can understand, you know, how important it is to, you know, go with a candidate like Ron Paul for long term.
Well, we've come, you know, the point we made earlier is we've come a long way from 2008, when you have Senator Jim DeMint getting on and really, or even Sarah Palin talking positively about Ron Paul's foreign policy. And boy, in 2007, that was a very different world. We've come. Sometimes I think the liberty movement, we're not as kind to ourselves as we should be, and we don't give ourselves enough credit, because this movement, for a lot of us, like myself, I became engaged in 2007, so this has been 5 years now in my rebirth, and I think a good rebirth it was, and I think sometimes we don't step back and see how far we come and how far we're going to go. The grain is set, and I remember this last year, some of the most, the two events that I can walk away from that really helped shape how I saw the future was going to CPAC in Washington, D.C., and then when I was at the Iowa straw poll. And I really got to see on the ground at that point how powerful and strong the youth movement was, the liberty movement. And we're talking about Ron Paul here a lot tonight, but really what we're talking about is the liberty movement. And the youth that's coming up is such a massive and intelligent and underrated group that you give them 10 years when they start voting and start coming into office and so forth. That's time has come, and we're working on it today. This is a small step right here. Supporting Revolution PAC and what they do is a small step.
The movement has the power of, I think, what Malcolm Gladwell once wrote about in his book, The Tipping Point, called stickiness. And if you contrast this to the Obama movement back in 2008, that also had a very strong youth component. But the social bonds that were formed were not long-lasting, because there was really no deep-seated reason why everyone supported Obama, other than, I think, because it was cool. And when that goes away, people don't form long-lasting friendships and connections and relationships based on the commonality of feeling the need to be cool. But when you have a stronger, as I mentioned, intellectual foundation that unites people, those types of bonds and friendships will last much longer than the more shallow reasons that were probably cited for supporting Obama, especially because it was a reflection of Obama's ideas in his campaign. It was never about any substance. It was always about hope and change. And he really never went into any detail, so neither could his supporters.
Right.
So the attitudes of his supporters were really very much a reflection of the ideas that Obama was espousing, and those social bonds just can't last. But with Ron Paul, there's all these meetup groups now that form, so that has stickiness. And this is what, interestingly, for those who are interested in sociology, Malcolm Gladwell wrote about a book called The Secrets of the Ya-Ya Sisterhood, which became, not that I'm an expert on that book, but why did that book become so popular? Because mothers and daughters, I believe, formed discussion groups, much like I have a discussion group, but based on all of these ideas. So it's really an interesting idea to draw that parallel between why Ron Paul is so successful versus the supporters of Obama several years ago.
Well, you know, it's funny you bring up stickiness, because what I'm seeing here is that the stickiness that everyone believed Romney had just doesn't exist anymore. Gingrich has definitely taken Romney right out of the running with 40.7% of the vote so far in South Carolina, with 94.9% reporting. Romney is dropped down to 27%, Santorum 17.2%, and our favored candidate 13.3%. That is Ron Paul. Now we're going to jump to a clip of Ron Paul that we shot yesterday in South Carolina during a whistle-stop tour. You really want to watch this. It is Ron Paul in his element. The audio is a little boomy because it was shot in an aircraft hangar, okay? They can't go to hotels anymore, all right? The rooms do not hold. They have to move themselves to aircraft hangars, all right? So keep that in perspective when you're watching this. And then we have that clip of the veteran that we spoke about earlier with Dan and Aaron when they shot that today, and also a senator who's recently endorsed Ron Paul. So let's go to the clip.
The campaign will be doing a lot today. We'll be making quite a few stops. We have been very encouraged. A lot of people do identify me with another generation, the younger generation, who's so enthusiastic about the things that we've been talking about and going back to the Constitution. So this to me is very encouraging, because the growth of the freedom movement is getting to be exponential. It was very, very slow for a long time. Intellectually, it's been around for quite a few years, 30, 40 years. At least there's been a remnant of people holding these ideas of personal liberty together, and the kind of thing that was embedded in our Constitution. But now, out of necessity, I think what's happening is people, whether young or old, are realizing what we have today is unsustainable. You just can't keep borrowing money and printing money and bailing out everybody and think it's going to last forever. And we know there's going to be an end point. And to me, I fight for this cause because I would like to see the transition be smooth. I would like to see us cut back on spending, balance the budget, restore constitutional liberty, restore sound money. If we do that, we can avoid these problems getting much worse. But if we continue to do what we're doing, we're going to see a further breakdown of the economy, and it's a worldwide phenomenon. And that is indeed a threat to our liberties. Too often, the people, when they're frightened, there's chaos, they claim we need more government. Like after 9/11, the solution wasn't to have more government intrusion into your lives, and that is what really happened. I mean, they thought that the answer to the threat of Al-Qaeda was to take away your Fourth Amendment, which the Patriot Act does. We don't need to undermine our liberty. We need to understand how liberty protects us. It doesn't undermine our security if we protect liberty.
The difference of our campaign is we really do believe we should cut spending. That's why I have made the proposal. It seems to be well received by all those who consider themselves fiscal conservatives. And that is cut spending. My proposal is to cut spending in a serious way the first year by $1 trillion. Yes, sir. Represent us in Washington, the majority of the people still want us to be and believe we can be the policemen of the world, solve all the problems, get involved with nation building, we cannot afford it anymore. So we have to redesign our foreign policy to protection of our national security and making sure that national defense is defense, but not a subsidy to the military-industrial complex. Entitlements are rights. Entitlements are not rights. You have a right to your life, you have a right to your liberty, and you should have a right to your property and a right to keep the fruits of your labor. That's what the incentive system does. Today, there's so many people who believe that they have to have an entitlement from government. An entitlement from government means the government's job is to take from one and give to another. It's a transfer of wealth. At the same time, when you do that, you undermine the production of wealth. And when a country is very wealthy and they're borrowing, credit is good, you can do this for a long time, and we did it for a long time, but that has come to an end. Right now, we can barely keep up with financing our debt, so we do know this is coming to an end. John Adams warned us that if we ever morph from a republic into a pure democracy, that the democracy proceeds to such a point that there's a demand on entitlements from the various groups. He said that, he used this word that surprised me, he says, the society would murder itself. And I'm afraid we're in the process of doing that. We're murdering our liberties, our civil liberties. We're murdering our ability to understand our foreign entanglement. And we are murdering our dollar and our economic system. So we are facing a deep challenge. The good news is that we don't have to invent the solution. We got into this mess because we had too many people who were careless and didn't understand and wanted to obey the Constitution. To me, the solution is rather simple. Let's only send people to Washington who do understand and will obey the Constitution. Is that you don't have to worry about compromising. Matter of fact, the more you stick to the principles, the more you bring people together if you truly understand them. In economic terms, it's your freedom to work hard, keep a turn, and spend the money the way you want. You don't have to say that you don't want to. You can be frivolous, but you can't put your responsibility of the outcome on somebody else. But you have the freedom to make those choices. The same thing applies to our social issues. Obviously, we all believe in making our own choices in religious issues. So if we can put this all back together and say freedom puts the responsibility on the individual, all of a sudden we bring people together who have different viewpoints, but we all have one viewpoint on what freedom is about. We want to have the freedom to run our lives as we choose and spend the money as we so choose. And therefore, we get in this together. And to me, I think this is the way you bring people together. We've experienced a grand experiment, the best experiment ever on freedom. We had the largest middle class and the most prosperous, richest middle class ever. But the evidence is very clear, and this is why people are getting scared. That middle class is shrinking. We're not producing the wealth. We're indebted overseas. We're indebted to ourselves. We have these huge debts, but the biggest one is hard to measure, and that is the obligations for the entitlement system. Because that goes up into over $100 trillion that is necessary, is just not there. So we have to restore the confidence in how a free market works. It worked before, it can work again. It wouldn't take us long if we get on the right track. But right now, we have embarked on propping up a bad system, transferring debt from those who have benefited, bailing them out, and dumping the debt on people, and that is why the economy is stagnating. So in a free market, if people get themselves in trouble, they have to either work harder, cut back, and pay off the debt, or they have to go through bankruptcy. Right now, we're not permitting that, so we're prolonging the agony, just as we did in the Great Depression, just as Japan did over the last 20 years. So we're into this mess for 4 years now, and unless we understand that and what we have to do, this is not going to see about him, the Fourth Amendment rights that you are entitled to undermine. No, this would be much better. Now, there is a concern by some who think they might have to sacrifice. Those are the people who have been living office. Those are the ones who have been benefiting by this system, getting the contracts and benefiting from the inflation, and then getting the bailout. So let's give them their sacrifice and let's take our freedoms back. I want to thank you very much for coming out. We will be moving on to our next stop, and I think we should stay optimistic, but do whatever you can to get some votes out tomorrow night. Thanks a lot.
Dr. Paul, would you get a picture with us?
Okay, sure can. Here we go.
Somebody do this one.
Oh, my wife.
My name is Mike Bodiford. I'm from Summerville, South Carolina. I'm an Army veteran. I went to Iraq in 2004. Even though we went there for what we all thought was a good reason, that, you know, everyone that fought us wasn't necessarily a terrorist. They hate us because we're there. And that, you know, if you kill someone's brother or their father, either legitimately or illegitimately, they're going to hate you, and they're going to come back and try to kill you. And then when you kill them, it's just perpetual violence. And it never ends. And there's never a goal. We never went over there and said, once you take this city, it's over. And, you know, year after year after year, and more of my friends died, and more money was spent, and there's never an end goal. And then finally, you know, we're out now with never a deciding battle, never a clear victory. It was just, okay, guys, you're finished. And it's very demoralizing, I think, to me and a lot of the people I served with, to know that your friends died and you don't really know why. You know, we went over there for WMDs and there's nothing there. And we haven't changed their culture. We haven't changed the way that they feel and think about us. If anything, they hate us more. And we've let, you know, it undermines our own national security, and it undermines our reputation around the world, and undermines the morale of our military. And I think Ron Paul has the right idea when he says that just leave them alone. If they want to go over there and handle things the way they want to, let them. It doesn't bother us any. All we have to do is just leave them alone. If they want to kill each other, have at it. You're not affecting us at all. And why waste our money and why waste our men? And why are Americans so easily expendable? You know, how come these other countries aren't going there and dying? You know, why does America always have to be the one that bears the brunt of all this? Why do we have to pay for it? Why do so many of us have to get killed and blown up? You know, I don't understand it. If we're so valuable and America really loves its veterans, then why do they so easily send us over to die? It doesn't make any sense to me. No one has the dedication that Ron Paul, you know, has. I mean, I think once you see the truth, I think that's whenever it's so easy to be passionate. It's so easy to be eloquent about what you're saying, because you don't have to come up with a skewed view. I don't have to make you believe what I believe. All I have to do is just tell you the truth, and you know, either you accept the truth or you don't. And I think Ron Paul is the only one that comes close to, you know, telling the actual truth. I mean, even though it's not always shiny, it's not always what you want to hear. You don't want to hear that, yeah, your military isn't going to win this war, because, you know, us as Americans, we hate losing. Patton said America hates a loser. You know, you always wanted to go after the, you know, the winner. And for us to be told that you're not going to win, it's hard to stomach, but it's the truth. Unless you want to go over there and just kill every single one of them, you're not going to change their way of life or their culture, and you're especially not going to change the way they feel about you by killing more and more of them. So I think that's why it's so. I think that's why this, you know, Ron Paul passion, I guess, is so contagious. Because once someone gets turned on to the truth, they're like, wow, I never realized how this all worked and how we're being manipulated by the media. If you look at our Bill of Rights, where they tell us that we're supposed to, we pledge allegiance to our country and uphold all this stuff, and they tell us that on the one hand, and then on the other, they're taking them all away. And if you are against the Patriot Act, you're somehow against America, or if you're against the wars, then you're somehow against the military. And it doesn't make any sense to me. But, you know, I think if Ron Paul keeps on keeping on, that, you know...
Cue music.
Yeah, definitely. You know, I think if he doesn't win the nomination, the conversation will still be there, the message will still be there, and someone will pick up the torch. At least I hope so.
Yeah, awesome. So if somebody, do you love Charleston?
Yeah. I was very excited about moving here. I moved here from Baltimore. I was stationed at Fort Meade, and I was very excited about moving here. And I like it a lot. And it's good to be here with a lot of Ron Paul supporters who feel the same way I do, and you know, like-minded people. I've had very, very good conversations in there, and it's so encouraging to know that I'm not the only one paying attention.
Right. If somebody was going to do two things in Charleston, only two things, what's the two things they should see and do, just from a touristy perspective?
Well, you should see Ron Paul speak, and you should vote for Ron Paul. That's one thing you should see and do in Charleston.
Supporting Dr. Paul. I really appreciate it. I'm from Greenville.
Lee Bright, Senate District 12. I believe that Ron Paul is going to fight to defend the Constitution. A lot of these politicians are deal makers, and I think Ron Paul's going to stand by the Constitution regardless of what other folks say or may want to argue with him about. He seems like the consistent constitutionalist in the race.
If you could name one issue that dominates why you said, hey, Ron Paul's my guy, what is that one issue?
I think that he is most concerned with the Constitution. I mean, I think if we get back to the Constitution, our lives will be a lot better. Those guys knew what they were doing, and it's worked for us great, but in the past several decades, we've gotten away from it.
So we've seen Ron Paul come in third and now second. How do you think we're going to do on Saturday?
I think it's going to go well in South Carolina. There's a lot of folks that haven't come out publicly. I wish they would, but have told me privately they're going to be supporting Dr. Paul.
Do you have anything you'd like to say to those people that might not be as bold as you've been?
Well, we would love to have you. I mean, this is patriotism at its finest, so step out. Just remember what our forefathers did to get us where we are, and it's now our turn to carry the mantle.
President Paul! President Paul! President Paul! President Paul! President Paul!
All right, welcome back to the South Carolina Primary Broadcast Revolution PAC studios. As you can see right now behind me, 98.8% are reporting in South Carolina. As I said before the break, 40% have gone to Gingrich, taking all the steam out of Mitt Romney's train. I kind of like that. I'm happy to see that Romney's going to have to, get a black eye, and but Florida's coming up, and we know that. From reports we're getting that there's huge amounts of money being dumped into Florida. Some of our consultants have told us that if you want to be competitive in Florida, you've got to spend $8 to $9 million. And there's no question about it that Romney and Gingrich are trying to do that. They're really fighting. So there is a strategy that is being deployed, not just by Revolution PAC, but by the official campaign. As a super PAC, we don't have any coordinated communication with them, so we don't really know. We have to rely on press releases and public information so that we can make our adequate decisions. But I can tell you this, the Revolution PAC is taking action in Florida. We're going to have many more broadcasts like this to come. Lisa, let's throw it back to you guys over there at the desk. Talk to us about
the delegate
what you're seeing in the delegate process.
Right. Well, we want to reinforce to everyone out there that this is really, the primary, the popularity contest vote, the beauty pageant vote, is very secondary to the delegate vote, and delegates right now are activating all around. I don't know which camera I'm looking at, but delegates right now are
talk to us.
I know. I'm like, I'll talk to you guys. I don't know what camera, but as we've been talking about, delegates right now are activating all over the United States, and we urge anyone who's watching right now to get involved in that process. Figure out if there's an organized process going on in your state, which there most likely is already a process going on, and figure out how you can become a part of it, either on an official level, on a grassroots level. And we know that if every Ron Paul supporter got one other person to the polls, we'd blow this out of the water. So it's about taking ownership and taking ownership for the outcome of this election, and really taking a leadership role. We're leaders now, and not just not followers of Ron Paul. We're leaders.
That's right.
And also a big component is to study up on the resources, understand the economic policies, understand the foreign policy, so when you do engage with other people, you can really kind of let them know how important it is for a vote for Ron Paul as opposed to any of the other candidates. So that's a very important component that each and every voter can do as well.
Yeah, and I think one thing to remind you, we were talking here during the Ron Paul speech, and in Florida, obviously, this is a strategy from the campaign. But we were talking, and we might well be covering that as well to do our talks. And so we really appreciated everybody coming in tonight. And remind you that to support these organizations that are really trying to bring liberty in our lifetime. Revolution PAC has done great work. If you can help them support, that's fantastic. We do this voluntarily because we believe in it. I know that you guys do too. You had a lot of choices of different people to watch tonight and listen to. Instead, you went on your computers. You listened to a different perspective. You were tweeting us great questions. We wish we could have answered every one of them or commented. We couldn't. We tried to get to the ones we could. It was fantastic, and we're going to keep on doing this, and we're sure you will too.
Thank you all. This is all possible because of everybody who tunes in and who really wants an alternative resource to what we have been seeing our whole lives. So this is fantastic, and I hope everyone will spread the word.
Yeah, when's the last time you had a panel of either libertarians, classical liberals, or anarcho-capitalists, which all were on the panel tonight, whether you guys knew it or not. So that's our kind of people, our kind of movement, where we can really try to bring that change and message out. So
a little bit of everything.
We thank you for choosing us tonight. We loved you for it, and we look forward to seeing you again. Gary's going to sign off, so thank you very much.
All right, that is the broadcast from Revolution PAC Studios in Obama's backyard in North Chicago. I want to thank everyone for tuning in tonight. I know I just got a message. There's still 2,000 people watching this stream. So there is more work to be done, all 2,000 of you. This is what I want you to do right now. I want you to go and scroll down to the page, and I want you to look at that donate form at the bottom of it. I want you to fill out your information. I want you to chip in $5, $10, or if you're that secret millionaire out there that we've been waiting for, how about 5 million? That would really help us out a lot. It's been a great night hosting this for you guys. There are many more primary dates to come. We have Florida on the horizon. We have Nevada on the horizon. Of course, Super Tuesday is going to be a huge day. So if you want to see more broadcasts like this, I feel like a PBS telethon here. If you want to see more broadcasts like this, seriously, use that form below. It's going to continue to perpetuate this effort. This is a message you are not going to hear on CNN, Fox, MSNBC, or any of the mainstream corporate spoon-fed media channels. This is your network. This is your message for your candidate, and we're going to use it to propel Ron Paul into the White House with your help. Thanks again for tuning in to the Revolution PAC broadcast of the South Carolina primary results. Have a great night.
Why do we sit down when all should be standing? And why do we back down at the critical moment, like running away from the waves of the ocean? We head for the hills with the high tide approaching, as sand slips away from the castle. When it's time to stand upright, why do we falter, like placing our freedom on the sacrificial altar? We hold tight to our fears and defend our oppressors as we fight for their lives and become the transgressors, as pacifists transform to violent aggressors. But I'm only a stranger here. I'm a long, long way from my home. I find strange. For what can one man do alone? They say, what can one man do alone? When is the right time to stand up for freedom? Could it be when you start to feel creating children who'll inherit the pain and the debt of this nation and be slaves to the banks that cause hyperinflation, who are masters of commerce, lies, and bad legislation? Whoa, if you looked in the eyes of 1,000 young children through fences of razors, their innocence stolen as the red flag of tyranny flies in the open, is that when you finally notice? Whoa, but I'm only a stranger here. I'm a long, long way from my home, and they say I can't change all the things I find strange. For what can one man do alone? Is what can one man do alone? I'm only a stranger looking to find better nature in my fellow man, but they keep telling me it's a sin to be free, and that's more than I'm willing to stand. Where will you be when the order is given to censor your mind as free speech is forbidden, as martyrs for peace from the world will be driven away by the sound of a bellowing thunder and choke on the blood of a dream going under, as arrogant men tear up our Constitution, and from every direction we cry revolution, standing together and without permission, soldiers for truth in the war of attrition, the love of our country as our